Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Tuesday, February 26, 2019. Previous to this meeting, the board met in executive session to consider litigation strategy with respect to Eversource Energy, consider litigation strategy with respect to GJA Clean Energy versus the Hopkinton Planning Board, to consider the purchase, sale, lease, or value of real property in relation to Open Space Preservation Center Trail, Town Hall, the Main Street Corridor Project, union contract updates, and to consider litigation strategy with respect to Wall Street development, because the chair declares that discussion in open session could be detrimental to the litigating or negotiating position of the board. So now we will convene in our regular open public session, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will start with our public forum. Residents are invited to share ideas, opinions, or ask questions regarding town government. Is there anyone who would like to speak this evening? Very quiet group. Okay, then seeing none, we will first move to our consent agenda, and the items on the consent agenda tonight are as follows. Item 1, the Board of Selectmen will consider approving the February 5th, 2019 and February 15, 2019 Board of Selectmen minutes. Item 2, ambulance fund gifts. The Board of Selectmen will consider accepting a $100 ambulance fund gift from Sybil A. Long of Hopkinton in memory of Kathleen R. Gilligan. And item 3, board resignations. The Board of Selectmen will consider accepting the resignation of Kelly Haggerty from the Cultural Council and Curtis Morrison from the Personnel Committee. Would any board member like to discuss one of these items separately? I would just like to say a word on items 2 and 3. So I will request a motion to approve the board minutes of February 5 and 15.
So move. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, that is unanimous. On the ambulance fund gifts, I just always like to give a special thanks to citizens who do make contributions. Sybil Long's generous $100 donation. Over time, and I think the police chief can probably attest, the contributions to this ambulance fund really make a difference, and they've added up to quite a bit, and they accomplish a lot. So, special thanks always. And with respect to the board resignations, I'm sure that we'll be sending a note of thanks to both Kelly Haggerty and to Curtis Morrison from the Personnel Committee. We very much appreciate their service and are sorry to see them go. These will be 2 new openings now that will be posted for the Cultural Council and the Personnel Committee. And a big thanks to both Kelly Haggerty and Curtis Morrison for their time serving the town. So I would request a motion for the approval of items 2 and 3, ambulance fund and board resignations.
So moved.
Second, anyone?
Second.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, that is unanimous. Thank you. Board committee appointments and action. The Board of Selectmen will consider appointing Devin Callanan to the Capital Improvements Committee for and I'm a little confused by this, Mr. Kamalo. It says a 5-year term to expire on either June 30th, 2020 or June 30th, 2023. So are we doing a 5-year or a 1 year?
In fact, I'll ask the board to postpone this discussion to a future meeting.
Okay.
After posting the agenda, we did learn that the appointing authority for the remaining 2 vacant positions on the CIC is the town moderator. and we forwarded this information to Tom. What we are hoping for is that when the appointment is made, that it is made in public and be announced to the community.
Okay, all right. Well, then this will be no action on that item. Okay, so, help us catch up on our schedule. Item B, the Board of Selectmen will consider appointing members to the Trail Coordination and Management Committee. Applications have been received from Jeffrey Hourhan, Charles Darcy, Peter Lagoy, Kenneth Parker, James Thomas, Mavis O'Leary, and 2 more are from Lindsay Hayes and Jamie Ronka. There are 4 at-large positions to be filled with 1, 2, and 3-year terms, and Mrs. O'Leary's application is conditional. She has stated she is willing to serve if there are not enough applicants, or if there are not applicants from the Hopkinton Trails Club. So there are 4 at-large positions that we will be appointing tonight. The committee, just to be clear, the committee also includes appointments from several of our other town boards, appointments from the Parks and Rec, the Conservation Commission, and the Planning Board. These names have not yet been received, so those are not what we're appointing tonight. We're appointing the 4 at-large members. So, and it looks like we have some very good applicants, which makes our job either easy or hard, depending on how you see it. Are any of these applicants here tonight? I know Mr. Lagoy is. Mr. Hourhan? Mavis is here. Who else is here, sir?
Dotchie.
Mr. Dotchie, and who's Ken Parker, yeah. And I know Peter's here, and can you give your names in the back, ladies?
Jamie Ronka.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And Mavis, of course. We know Mavis is here. Can't miss Mavis. Would each of you like to just maybe starting in order, Mr. Hourhan is here? No, is not. Okay, maybe starting with Mr. Charles Douchy, would you mind just coming up and saying a couple words about yourself and your interest, and then we'll ask the next person to come up, and then the board can have a discussion. Mr. Douchy, welcome.
Okay, my name is Chuck Douchy. I am relatively new to town, July of 17. For years, I've been a hiker and walker. In my previous town, I was involved, for 14 years on the Board of Health, several years on the Affordable Housing Trust, and active in trail maintenance in town. When I arrived here, I discovered that there was an active trail club and got involved. Been doing maintenance work besides using the trails, and doing actually some planning and development of new trails. I feel that I also have a background in environmental science, a long professional career as a consultant in design work and wetlands delineation. So I feel I bring both an interest and skills that would be useful on the committee, and I would like to contribute to my new home.
Great. Well, thank you. And I know you've been a little bit humble in your overview, because I read your background is from the Yale School of Forestry. Your career has been an environmental consultant, and you've done a lot of work on designing trails in the town of Leverett, I believe, and you've been active with HALT. So sounds like you have a very good both professional and volunteer background in directly in the field. So we're glad you spoke up and applied. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could, please, to Chuck.
Yes. Sure.
Yeah, I think we have to hang on everybody.
All right, then let's just speak with each one individually. It might be better that way.
I would say a drawback is my hearing.
All right.
What?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Hurd, please.
Chuck, what town did you participate in all those other activities, please?
In the town of Lever, little town of 1,800, just north of Amherst.
Okay, great, thank you. All set.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Great. And let's see who's the next lucky person. Peter. We don't need to hear too much. We know all about Peter, but give us a whirl, Peter. Just the rundown. Like you don't have enough to do.
Yeah, I didn't bring a prepared speech. Yeah, so I've been involved in trails in town, in Hopkinton for a long time, but prior to that I was involved in town in using trails, and I've used trails pretty much all over the country, so I'm fairly familiar. I've also spent a lot of time looking at what other towns have been doing. And then obviously also worked in town on the planning board and growth study committee and that sort of thing. So,
We've heard of you before.
yes. Yes, any questions?
We're good.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Peter.
thanks, Peter.
Okay. Can Dr. Parker, you're another well-known, but come have a word with us.
Okay, I've lived in town since 1998. Been active with the Hopkinton Trails Club, the Upper Charles Trail Committee, on the board of HALT. With regards to the Upper Charles Trail Committee, we wish to have a liaison person on this Trails Coordinating Committee, and I've offered to do that in conjunction with other people on the committee, and I guess I'm the only one so far from that, but since we don't have a formal position, that's what I guess I'm angling for, is to serve partially for that. So my issues in town is that I'm particularly interested in working better with the planning board, especially having to do with new developments, with regards to making sure that trails get their rightful attention. And secondly, I'm interested in better access to the schools by way of trails, so that it's just plain easier to get to school, so that maybe a little bit of congestion in town can be relieved by better access to trails. Having said that, one of the things I do every weekend is, pretty much every Saturday and Sunday throughout the year go with my daughter on a trail, usually within Hopkinton, because she doesn't travel very well, so I'm very familiar with most of what possible trails there are, and I'm a major user of those trails.
Excellent. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. Is James Thomas here tonight? Okay. Not Mr. Thomas. I know Mr. Thomas said he has been walking the trails since he was a baby, so I guess he's a lifelong resident and trail user in town.
Well, the first name of his email is Mudfinder.
What? This time of the year, maybe? Mavis, want to come up and say hi? Mavis is another longtime volunteer who's always there to volunteer when there's a need.
Good evening. Mavis O'Leary from Curtis Road. I've lived in Hopkinton about 60 years, I think, and I've always been interested in nature and trails and getting people outside, including myself. I'm a member of HALT. I was on the Land Use Planning Committee when the Western Nursery land went up for sale. I've been on the Zoning Advisory Committee. I don't know what else I can tell you, but I'm not a born in Hopkinton resident, but I've been here long enough. So I'm enjoying this town for everything that it has to offer and what I can offer back to it. So I've had some experience on trails. As I say, I've been on a couple of committees, and I've helped maintain trails and build to a certain extent with assistance from others. So I would enjoy being on this committee if there is a vacancy and there is no one to step up. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, so
Mr. Herc.
Mavis, a couple of thoughts. One, Brendan will never let me be a townie because I wasn't born here.
Yeah.
But all 5 of my kids are townies, so he has to accept that.
Don't have to.
Struggles with that sometimes.
Take it with a friendly amendment.
Secondly, So we have a couple of folks here from the Trails Club, and I know when you filled out your app, you're like, I'll do it if there's no one else there. Are you comfortable with others, or do you want to keep
Oh,
your name
sure.
in the mix here?
No, I'm comfortable with others from the Trails Club.
So, but are you comfortable with them serving, and you, because you qualified that if no one from the Trails Club was here, then you would be willing and interested in serving? But if the others are
Yes,
willing, are you willing to let them do it? Of
course,
And that's
of
okay with
course.
you? I just want to make sure you're good.
yes, I'm good with
Okay,
that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Nesro?
And would you, following along those lines, would you also be willing to throw your name in the hat for some of the other boards that would be appointing if there's not enough people there?
What other boards, are you saying, am I,
So we're appointing, what, 4 people?
Or at large tonight?
Large.
Yes.
And there are,
Well, there are, 3 of the town committees are asked to provide a recommendation, and that individual doesn't have to be a member of that board. They simply need to be recommended by them. A member recommended by Parks and Rec, recommended by Conservation, and recommended by the Planning Board, and those we will be doing later. So that's what you're referencing.
that's what I'm referencing.
oh, okay, sure,
Perfect.
Okay.
thank you.
Mavis is the example. Whenever there's the town has a need, Mavis said, I'll do it, I'll do it. She's the ultimate good volunteer. Thanks, Mavis. And then we have two more new applicants that didn't, we do have their information here. Lindsay Hayes and Jamie Ronca. And Lindsay, I see you over there. Want to come up and say hi? I see Lindsay and Jamie both are in an area where there's been a lot of trail discussion, so they would certainly bring
Hi.
a good aspect.
My name is Lindsay Bomber Hayes. I'm new to Hopkinton. I just moved here in September. I have not built trails or maintained them, but I've used them quite a bit. I'm from the area. I'm from Holliston, and after living in Holliston, my husband and I lived in Framingham for 7 years, and we used them a lot there because we didn't have a safe place to walk. We were in a really busy neighborhood. I have a 7-month-old and a 4.5-year-old. So right now, we mostly use the paved trails because I have a stroller, but looking to volunteer within town and help out where I can.
And your professional background is you're an attorney, I believe.
Yep, I'm a lawyer. I've worked in clinical research for drug and device companies, actually a nonprofit associated with Harvard. And currently, I'm counsel at Brown Brothers Harriman, which is a financial institution in Boston.
Busy with 2 little guys on top of it.
Sorry?
You're very busy with 2 little
Yeah.
guys on top of it.
Yeah, I got time. So.
Great, well, thank you. Any questions from members of the board? Okay, that's good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, I think Jamie Ronca is also here. Thanks for coming forward, Jamie.
My pleasure. I've been in Hopkinton for 6 years. I spent 3 years up until this most recent August volunteering on the Conservation Commission. I'm an occupational therapist by training, so I have a background in accessibility and how to make things more walkable. My master's project was actually a walkability study around the Durham, New Hampshire area where I went to school. And service has always been important to me. I was a Girl Scout for 16 years, and my dad was my Girl Scout leader. And we did a lot of hiking and camping. And now I have a 3-year-old and twin 6-month-olds. And the twins are why I didn't renew or apply to be renewed with Concom. I was worried about not having enough time initially. And then I guess now they're 6 months old and I'm ready to come back.
You are.
Need a break.
So, okay. Well, I know I look back on your resume, you have a lot of good experience in both. I think the accessibility issue is very important, and in trail use and trail management, and, you bring a valuable perspective. And Mr. Kamalo, can I just ask you where, like I noticed both you and Lindsay are from a neighborhood where there's been a lot of discussion about trails. This board is advisory. So, for instance, debate about, or discussions of trails that are in an individual's area, would they be required to recuse themselves or not, where it's just an advisory board?
We would still ask them to consult with town council or the
Okay.
ethics office.
Okay, only on something that pertains to your immediate,
Madam Chair, they'll be voting to submit requests, and they'll be voting to forward stuff to us
Right.
for final decisions. But so it's open meeting law, and it's typical. I think they would have to recuse as abutters. But we would like to have some abutters, I think, involved in
Right.
some fashion too.
right.
And also, I don't think the initial question of can they be abutters and be on the committee, I think the answer is yes.
Oh, I think
But they
so, too.
absolutely, I think, would have to recuse,
I think so
right?
too. I was questioning a recusal. Probably would,
They're
Yeah.
open meeting 101, yes, same as us.
right.
Yes, so long as I think there's an identified financial interest.
Okay, so both you and Lindsay need to be comfortable with the fact that if you served on that board, when issues came up relative to a trail in your immediate vicinity, you probably couldn't participate in that.
Right, and it was partly the process of how everything is, I guess, still happening, which is part of what inspired me to get involved, because I know it's been a difficult process for my neighbors
Right.
and for us. And if there had been a better process in place, I think it would have been a lot easier for everyone involved. And having some guidelines that benefit both people who want to use the trails but maybe aren't as able to, versus people who are, like every weekend trailblazers. I think finding that balance is important for our community.
So if we could, I think we should explore this topic a little bit further so everybody understands, because maybe some are not familiar with how the open meeting law works.
What was the Upper Charles Trails Committee is appointed by the board, right?
Yes.
And so they had to follow open meeting law as well, correct?
Correct.
And we had some challenges with that on occasion because of abutters and input from various parties and things like that. This committee would have to follow the same rules, we believe, right? Mr. Kamal is going to confirm. I can't imagine why they wouldn't, but we'll confirm it. But we've had instances in town, not in recent years, but in years past, where people have gotten files or they've been, their names have been submitted to the State Ethics Commission for violating open meeting law as abutters or questionable abutters, not questionable people, but were they really an abutter or not an abutter?
Right.
We've had some really difficult things, and in other towns, people have been fined thousands of dollars for violating open meeting laws. So I think it's an important topic, because in Hopkinton, trails are important to all of us
Yeah.
in different ways. And I'd hate to see anybody get involved and all of a sudden get a bill for $1,000 and they're like, what the heck's this all about? Because somebody filed a state ethics complaint against them and they didn't follow through and the lawyers got involved and yada, yada, yada. So it's a lot more than taking the kids, which I have, in strollers on the trails. There's a lot more to it than maybe what others are thinking. And you have to be careful, because if somebody steps on a twig the wrong way and it gets somebody else mad and they file a state ethics complaint, all heck's going to break loose.
Right.
So I don't mean to scare anybody off, but that's the reality. And we see a lot of school committee folks here tonight too. There's the reality of the job once you get appointed to a public body like this.
And having served on Concom for 3 years, Don McAdam is very cautious and very explanatory about open meeting law. So I feel like I have learned from him all about it. And we had instances where I was in a butter. I think that because the trail in question went through Concom, and so I recused myself from those conversations. And I wasn't in the room when they were happening. So I'm very familiar with that process. But I think because of my experience on Concom, I am.
So will your neighbors expect you to do something on their behalf that you can't do because you're in a butter to some of these trails?
No, in fact, they're used to me saying, sorry.
That's a tough question, I get it, but.
Right, yeah. And I think I'm well prepared for it because it came up during Concom, when I served on Concom with some questions around the trails. And they would ask me questions and I would say, oh gosh, I don't know, I'm not in the room when it happens, but here's Don's email. If you have any questions, he's really helpful.
Okay.
So I'm well practiced in it and they know that I'm not gonna.
I remember I got appointed to a committee, I'm sorry, I'm diverging a little bit, and it was to stabilize this HCA barn over here. And we got appointed to a public committee. and guys literally showed up with hammers in their hand for the first meeting. I'm like, what are you doing with the hammers? Well, aren't we gonna fix the barn? I'm like, no, that's not how this works. And it took us 6 months to get a piece of paper in place to actually do something with the barn. And they got very frustrated because they didn't know what they were getting into. You obviously have been on Concom, so you get it, but others may not understand. As a public body, there's a lot of rules that go with this, and there's a lot that can get blown out of proportion, frankly, if we're not careful. And we want to make sure that that doesn't happen to you folks, or certainly not involve us too, so.
Absolutely. I think it's, if I may, I think it's also really difficult for some of the younger families to get involved in the town committees and things. So that's part of the reason why I try to come forward and volunteer, because I know that I'm also active in the moms group in town. It's hard. It's bedtime. But I think that it's such a big portion of our population that doesn't get to show up to a lot of the meetings, that it's also really important to represent some of the younger families in town.
Well, and I appreciate you bearing with us, because part of the reason I brought this up relative to both you and Lindsay is, of course, your neighborhood has had a lot of focus on it recently relative to trails, which is part of the reason, it was part of the impetus for putting this committee together, because we looked at what was and wasn't working. I think having people or a representative on a committee that understands the other side, if I can say that, of where people are coming from who are concerned or are not gung-ho, but at the same time, I mean, clearly when you're talking trails, that's just one piece of it. Look at trails all over the place, and that's like, right, who recuses themselves from what? With Upper Charles, it could go here, it could go there. There's such a wide area that pertains to trails. It would certainly involve much more than just your immediate neighborhood. I just wanted to, that's what I think a representative such as you or Lindsay that can represent concerns, and as you said, the moms group is a great asset. At the same time, I just want people to understand that when you get on a board, as Mr. Hurst said, there's a whole lot of other issues than just your own one, and it's one cannot get onto a board because they want to make this one issue right that's in their backyard. Most likely, you're going to have to be disengaged from that. So as long as there's that understanding.
I'm in the solar business. I do nothing solar in Hopkinton because I sit here. Nothing. So we had a discussion about solar briefly tonight. I got up and walked out of the room, and that's just the way it is.
Mr. Kamalu, there are 4 positions that we're appointing tonight for a 1, 2, and 3-year term. Can you give us the breakdown of how many 1-year terms, how many 2-year terms, how many 3-year terms?
It's right here. There's 2 1-years.
2?
1 2-year and 1 3-year.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and then there is the opportunity for liaisons, the liaisons, but then associates after the committee has been in place for a year, so. Okay. Any more questions for Jamie?
Good.
Sorry to make you stay so long. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Board members, input. We are looking for 4 members out of these 7 or 8 very qualified applicants.
So through the Mrs. Chair,
Yes.
the liaison/associate members, how many are we able to put on in addition to the 4 that we're putting on tonight?
None. There are 3 members that we're waiting for recommendations from Parks and Rec, Concom, and Planning Board, so we're not
Okay.
touching those tonight.
Okay.
The ability to have associate members was written into the charge, but the associate members would not occur until the committee has been in place
Okay.
for a year, so they get their feet into them. So we are looking at the 4 at large. There are 2 1-year positions expiring June 30th, 19, so that's really more like 4 months. There is a 2-year expiring June 30th, 2020, and a 3-year expiring June 30th, 2021.
So, Madam Chair, just to maybe simplify the process a little bit, unfortunately, we had 2 candidates that weren't able to join us this evening, Mr. Arhan and James Thomas. Would it be reasonable to just table those applicants for now. I'm sure we'll find positions for them in the future if they want to stay involved, but typically when we have folks show and a couple others, I get why people can't be here, but,
Sure.
do you know what I mean? So, I don't know if everyone else feels the same about that. And then the only other thing I would suggest is Mavis, I think, is very comfortable not serving if others from the Trails Club are going to serve. And I think she said that that would be okay tonight if that were the case. So I'd be happy to appoint Mavis personally, but if Mavis is happy having others people do it because that works for her too, then I'm happy with that as well. So I kind of want to leave that up to her, actually, so that's why I asked the question.
Are you good with that, Mrs. O'Leary? Okay. I still can't call her Mavis, because I'm a townie.
I know, well, that's your hand.
You can.
What was me about that?
Well, with that strategy, Mr. Herr, we would have Charles, is it pronounced Douchy? Douchy. Mr. Douchy, who has an excellent background. Both Mr. LaGoy and Mr. Parker we know well for their involvement. And there are two members from the Blackthorn neighborhood.
So, Madam Chair, I would move to start that we appoint Charles Douchy, Peter LaGoy, and Kenneth Parker to one of the three positions or four positions, and we'll figure out the terms here in a minute, for starters.
So to add on that, I'd like to nominate Mr. LaGoy to be the 3-year seat. Are we in the position to?
I don't know how the chair wants to handle that. I just thought we'd get the names going first, and then we'll figure out who gets what slot.
Let's get the four names, and then we'll divvy up the terms.
Okay.
So we have three.
So I have a motion then to at least put those first three names into seats.
Mr. LaGoy, Mr. Douchy, and Mr. Parker? Yeah, I'll second that.
Well, Mr. Nesrela, you have that's been made and seconded, but Mr. Nesrela will...
I'm in agreement with the three. I think what I'm kind of looking at is service to the town and who is served. And I think those, Mr. Douchy, LaGoy, and Parker have all been, instrumental in our town. So I fully support that. The next question is who's going to be the fourth. And again, I would use that same reasoning as to who's served in our town. So for that, I would say that Jamie seems to be a qualified candidate, given her experience with the Conservation Commission.
So we're still have the motion and the second on the table, Madam Chair. So the reason I make the motion for the first three candidates, Mr. Nasrullah, is only because I think we have two other excellent candidates, but they're both from the same neighborhood, and given everything we've also talked about, I think we need to be careful how many people we appoint, frankly, from that neighborhood, so we don't get other neighborhoods or other parts of town. See, this is our job. We got to think about somebody way 6 miles away is going to yell at us if we put two people on from one neighborhood and not spread out, where people are coming from, et cetera. So that's why we do these three first, and then we can sort of go back and forth and figure out the best fit for that neighborhood position, if you will.
I'm in agreement. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, well, in that case, Mr. Herr's motion was made by him, and it was seconded by Mr. Ted Stone, I think?
That's right.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table for starts to appoint Charles Douchy, Peter LaGoy, and Kenneth Parker to the Trails Management Committee. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, that is unanimous, and if I may just put in my 2 cents, I think it's great to have some volunteers from a neighborhood that's been very much in the front line right now in looking at some of the issues. So I'm glad that both Lindsay and Jamie have come forward. As long as everybody understands the limitations, if you will, that Mr. Herr discussed with being in a neighborhood where that's sometimes under active discussion. So, comments by board members. Mr. Nasrullah, I agree with what you had to say about the qualifications of Jamie. I think they're actually both good candidates, but I would support
I would actually like to say, I don't think anyone was not qualified. I think everyone has demonstrated interest and experience, which would be helpful on this committee. I'm just thinking of past service, and that's the only reason why I was singling out. Jamie is... I was open to some more conversation, but yes, so I move to appoint Jamie, I don't have your last name.
Ronka?
Jamie Ronka as the fourth committee member.
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? Motion has been made and seconded to appoint Jamie Ronka. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, that is unanimous. Okay, now.
So
who
we
gets
will
what?
have, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, we will have associate members for this committee at some point in the near future, after we get the other applicants from the various boards, correct?
That is correct.
So the other applicants here that would want to serve as associates, there'll be spots, and those positions are great positions to kind of get involved, and then as soon as somebody has to resign for whatever reason, those positions get filled typically by an associate, and so it'd be a great way to kind of keep a lot of energy in this committee. Not that I think we're gonna have a problem with energy in this committee. So for those that didn't get appointed tonight, I'm sorry personally, but we can accommodate you in other ways here very soon.
Mr. LaGoy has his hand up.
Mr. Lagoy, yes.
I have a question.
Come to the mic so everybody at home can hear you
Okay.
and see you.
Just a quick procedural question. As somebody pointed out, this committee, it's 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year term, but the first year is really 4 months. Is there any way to make that a 1 year and 4 month appointment procedural? That would seem, 4 months, the committee's probably going to start rolling at that point. So that's just a question. And
I know.
to the chair.
That's a good point.
It's a good question. It's been identified as a 1 year term, and I think because the board is discussing this issue, whoever is appointed to the 1 year term, I'm sure they're going to raise their hand and say they are available to be appointed for the next either 2 or 3 year term.
But the answer is no.
No.
Okay, that was the question. Okay, thank you.
All right. Are there any suggestions on the part of board members about who should take what position?
Yeah, I do.
All right,
So-
Mr. Ted Stone.
I'd like to see Mr. LaGoy put in as our 3-year member, which is actually 2 years and 4 months. I would like to see Mr. Dotchie put in as our 2-year member, and Mr. Parker and Ms. Ronka as our 1 year.
Are you making a motion?
I just did.
That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, we will vote on Peter LaGoy for the 3-year term ending June 30th, 2021. Charles Dotchie for the 2-year term ending June 30th, 2020. Dr. Kenneth Parker for a 1-year term ending June 30th, 2019, and Jamie Ronka for another 1-year term ending June 30th, 2019.
Are the, Madam Chair, are the applicants good with the suggestions made forward?
Nodding heads.
Yes?
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming and volunteering, and keep posted for some of the other openings.
Get out there and start working.
Start looking.
Bring a hammer.
Yeah, bring a hammer.
Thank you very much.
Keep bringing axe.
School committee, we have a public hearing at 7:30, but I think we can, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry.
Board of Registers.
Board of Selectmen will consider appointing a nominee for reappointment to the Board of Registrars. This is Veda. It is listed as Carr, but I know Veda's last name is Kerr, K-E-R-R, to a term to expire February 2nd, 2022.
Madam Chair, I move that the Board of Selectmen reappoint Veda Kurt to the Board of Registrars for a term to expire February 2nd, 22.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, that is unanimous. Thank you, and thank you, Veda, for volunteering.
Thanks, Veda.
This, we have a half an hour slotted for this SOI.
I don't think it's going to take an hour.
This is something that we've gone through the last few years, and I don't think it takes a half an hour. I think it just takes a couple of minutes, because, so we can start it, I think, before this 7:30.
Yeah, if you folks will, if everyone will bear with us, there is a posted public hearing for 7:30 for Western Nurseries. So what, I think we can start the school committee, and then if you will pause to officially open the public hearing and ask that to be put on hold while we continue with the school committee, because I don't think it's going to take very long. Does that work for everybody here? Okay. All right.
So, Madam Chair, we're officially in item 4 now?
We are officially on item 4. This is the school committee Elmwood School Statement of Interest Action. The Board of Selectmen will consider voting to authorize the superintendent of schools to submit to the Mass School Building Authority the Elmwood School Statement of Interest. The board previously approved the submission of similar applications in the last 2 years. Each year, the MSBA did not invite the town into its capital pipeline program, but we're going to try again. So,
Madam Chair, if I may, I would like to make a motion to authorize the superintendent of school to submit to the MSBA the Elmwood School Statement of Interest. We went through this last year.
Second.
It's... Okay.
does it need to be
Doesn't
read?
mean we can't talk about it. Let's get the motion on the table and get on
I'm
it.
going to give you a
right?
quick second to speak to it, and then, well, okay. Give us the quick rundown here.
I certainly will. So, as you know, we are very much concerned with the enrollment growth in the community. Since January 1st, and I know that we were just here talking about our budget, but we have enrolled 32 students again since January 1st. So they are coming, and they're coming very quickly. What we would like to do is submit a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority so that we could do a build and renovate project at the Elmwood School. We have to submit this prior to April 12th, and when we submit it, we also need to have you read a very particular motion, and we also have to have the minutes for this evening's meeting that we submit to them. It does not guarantee that we will be in. It doesn't say anything about the town paying any money. What would happen is somewhere around November, December, we would be invited into the eligibility phase. And if we're invited into the eligibility phase, we then have 270 days to complete all 7 things that you see on the memo that I had submitted to you. So it is a very long process. My guess is once you're invited in, it could be 5 years before you open the doors to a new school. So I think the more quickly we act, the better off we'll be.
Absolutely.
5 years?
It could be.
Are there any questions on the part of the board? I think we all know where we are. Dr. Kavanaugh, I understand there is a very specific form of vote that needs to be recorded. I filled this in as best I could, except for some of the part at the bottom about description of deficiency.
Here, I actually have it all filled in.
If you have it, I will read. I will read it. And do we need to take a roll call vote, or can we just do maybe we should, just for the record, her yes, Deadstone yes?
So I'm confused. Is there a separate motion that we need to do, not just the general one? That Mr.
There is a
Deadstone and I did?
form of the vote, a text for the city and town's vote. So I'm going to read this text and ask for this
So
motion.
let's kill the first motion that we have on the table right now.
Yeah,
So I'll remove it.
withdraw that. Okay. Mr. Kamala?
I want to make sure we're looking at the same motion.
I have the
Yeah.
motion that Dr. Kavanaugh just presented to me.
That's fine.
Do we need this to be a roll call vote, like each person say yes, or can we, well, wouldn't hurt.
Does not need, yeah. Does not need to be.
There's no need to, okay. Okay. I will request the following motion. Resolved, having convened in an open meeting on Tuesday, February 26, 2019, prior to the statement of interest submission closing date, the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Hopkinton, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated March 15, 2019, for the Elmwood School located at 14 Elm Street, Hopkinton, Mass., which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for an application for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. 1. Priority number 4, prevention of severe overcrowding expected to result from increased enrollments. And 2, priority number 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as windows, accessibility, heating, and ventilation systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in the school facility, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the city, town, regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Someone like to move this motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right.
Some of the language in that was like in the past tense, like we voted, but this is, the motion is to do that, but it says we voted to do that. It's a little odd, but this is the language. Okay.
Don't mess with it.
I'm a,
Okay. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, it is unanimous. Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
So it's now back in the hands of the school committee for you to take your vote, or have you already?
We already did take our vote, so.
And how did that go?
Let you guess.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's perfect timing. All right, on time. So, Mr. Mazzett,
Front and center, sir.
hour being 7:30, we have a posted public hearing, and this is for Western Nurseries Entertainment License Special Temporary Alcohol License, 93 East Main Street. The Hopkinton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing relative to a special temporary alcohol license and a single event entertainment license application from Peter Mazzett on behalf of Western Nurseries, Inc. at 93 East Main Street for outdoor public entertainment, including amplification systems, for its annual marathon viewing and after-party fundraising event to benefit the 26.2 Foundation to create awareness for the International Marathon Center project. This event will be held on the grounds of at 93 East Main Street on Monday, April 15, 2019, from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Projected number of attendees could exceed 750. So, and I noticed it said no rain date. Obviously, it couldn't be worse than last year. Let's hope that won't
Last year,
happen.
we got about 250.
You did, even with that.
Yeah,
Tickets sold or people?
probably 300 tickets and 250 people
Wow.
showed up.
Amazing.
And you know what? It was a great time. Even though the weather was horrible, it was a great time.
Were there some kind of enclosed tents
Yeah.
for people to be in? Oh,
Yep.
unbelievable. Well, are there questions from the board? I know you
Excuse
run a
me?
great event. Mr. Kamala?
Motion to open the public hearing.
I'm terribly sorry. Do I have to read all that again, do you think?
No, just the motion.
All right.
Second.
Motion to open the public hearing moved and seconded. All those in favor to open the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Anything you want to tell us, Peter? I know you run a good event, and you know what you're doing, and...
Yeah, we're running it, the same thing as last year. The liquor license is just for beer and wine. It'll be Start Line Brewery and Marty's. It will go from 8 to 4 with the liquor license application. Really no change in the map or the layout or the directions on how to get there. I talked to Officer Jay Porter today, and he confirmed that as long as people follow the directions, they can get there easily during the hours that the race is going on. So, I don't know how many people will show up. We'll do pre-ticket sales. We'll have a good idea beforehand. We did that for our fall event, and, you know, we can build a assumption on how many people will show up based on pre-ticket sales. You can put a factor of probably 1.5 on that. So, you know, if the numbers get too high, I'll certainly talk to the police and fire department, but I don't think, you know, I think 500 to 700 might be a safe estimate.
Anything at the door, or it's all going to be pre-sales?
It's pre-sales, but it's $5, it's $20 if you buy tickets beforehand and $25 at the gate. So there's an incentive to buy beforehand. And all the proceeds go to the 26.2 Foundation, in particular supporting the spearheading of the International Marathon Center of the Future in Hopkinton, hopefully.
Sounds awesome. Good. Questions on the part of the board?
So how do you control the alcohol, something like that here?
Tip certified people, bracelets on the way in, nobody leaves, nobody goes outside the fenced-in area. You know, we do have police detail there, both during the race and then after the race, we'll have it right there too. And a bunch of us will be monitoring it, both Ted's employees at Startline and Western Nursery's employees.
I mean, it's a great party. I'm looking forward to, I'm gonna run by it again this year, I hope. And it's rocking all the time, but, I mean, it's also big and, you know, it's kind of, it can be, if not careful, it can turn into a bit of a free-for-all. I know it hasn't, but I'm just thinking of ahead of the Charles. You know, when I first moved to Boston 30 years ago, that was a free-for-all down there, and then they kind of buttoned it down and tightened it up a lot. But you feel good about controlling all that with 750 people there?
I do. I mean, and this will be our 4th event that we've done. And Ted and I we feel responsible for that kind of thing, along with the people from Marty's. So I think we keep an eye on it. The fall event that we have has multiple craft breweries. This just is one. So I think that with Jeff and Ted and those guys, I think they want to do what's right too.
I mean, it's a day for fun, it's a day for parties, and as you make your way along the course, and the longer and later in the day it gets, the more hammered the people are along the way, you know, so by the time you get down by BC, there are drunk people in your face, and you're like pushing them away, like, you stink, get out of my face. I know it's earlier here, but just make sure this, you know, everybody's aware that we gotta be careful. I
think the police
kids trying to get into that big party and having some fun, right?
Yeah, and I think the police being right there will help this a lot too. Jay Porter says either 1 or 2. If I think we need to do 2, we can have somebody act as a security and bring them right in. Last year we had some bigger name bands. This year we don't, so we actually had bouncer type people there last year because of that. We're not planning on that this year with the bands that we're bringing. More local bands this year.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Nasrullah?
Yes. Can you handle crowds larger than the 750?
Yeah, I think this space would hold 1,500 easily. It's a big space.
Yeah.
And the parking, if you're wondering about that, yes, we can handle the parking, because not everybody comes at once. There might be 300 people or 400 people if we get 700 there at one time, because it's a long spaced out day.
Right. So, if you had more than the 750, you'd be getting more police officers on site.
Well, I think 2 will be fine. If we sell 500 tickets, then I'll start to think maybe there could be more than 750 if we pre-sell 500 tickets.
Right.
And like I said, I would talk to the police at that point again to make sure it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone felt comfortable.
So, I mean, like, how many police officers per, you know, how many people per officer is kind of what
I don't know, but that's what they were recommending based on those numbers, so.
Okay.
I don't know what their ratio is exactly.
So would you be willing to go get additional officers if
we had to.
If we had to, okay.
Yeah. No, I want to do what's right.
Yeah, I know you do.
It's not a bad predicament to be in if you pre-sell 1,500 tickets, that you have to get another couple of cops.
Yeah, and maybe we shut it off. And there is a ratio of space and how many people, and I just can't remember what it is, but I remember last year, I think the space would hold 1,500 people.
Yeah. So I'm a firm believer in, when we have these come in front of us, that we kind of hold everyone's feet to the fire, especially on the first time, to let them know how serious we are about everything and our rules and regs and compliance and safety. I think you have 2 feathers in your cap. You've run many successful ones of these, and it's also at your business. So I don't foresee a Boston College-style environment there. I don't think that the owners of the property or the people that are selling the beer and wine and whatnot would allow it to get to that. I have full confidence in everything that you've done so far. I have no reason to doubt it. And for those exact reasons, I'm for this application. I'm also, I don't know if in your application there's a request to waive the fee, but I would be more than willing to welcome the idea of waiving the fee.
Which fee? I had to pay an entertainment, one for the border parties, one for the liquor license.
This isn't a back and forth, Mr. Mezza.
So I'm not just picking on BC, you know, I don't mean to just pick on Boston College, my wife would get mad at me, but just in general, it's kind of crazy down there.
I just,
Brendan, you'll be there.
Only if there's Stroh's, Peter, only if there's Stroh's.
Oh, gosh. They make that?
I don't know. I may have had one with you or 2 in my life.
I just have one question, and I know obviously the police are well aware of this, so they've got all their safety plans figured out, whatever they are, but I was just kind of curious, how do the emergency responders handle an event, if there was an emergency, like a medical event or something at the height of the marathon race? What would they do? Would they come up from Cedar?
Yeah, the way we're telling
Just how do you,
people to come there is they've got to get to the north side of 135, and to get to the north side, you really have to take 495 north and get off on Route 9, 85 south, and then come in from Corderville Road. You following me?
no, yeah, I am, I'm looking at our fire chief in the back, thinking, you just have an ambulance stay there?
It's there, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay, so that they wouldn't have to get there with the race going on, they just evacuate that person through the back roads, basically.
But that ambulance is also part of the public safety for Marathon Day for that side of town anyway, right? It's not just for this part.
Exactly, and I can backfill it as needed. I have a couple extras that if one's used, I can move another one.
Got it.
Okay, so if there were an event that needed the ambulance, there would be a backfill at Western Nurseries, because...
And I'm quite sure there will be a nurse on staff, on site. That would be me.
All right. Well...
Did you give him a speech this year?
No.
If there are there any further questions? I would request a motion to approve a
We gotta close the meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will
And then
close
we
the
gotta
public
get-
hearing
we
unless,
gotta
are there
get-
any,
we gotta public
are there
input.
any public comments that I haven't taken yet? Seeing none, okay. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that is unanimous. And now I will request a motion to approve a single event entertainment license and a special temporary alcohol license for Western Nurseries for its annual marathon viewing and after-party fundraising event on 4/15/2019.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herr?
how much are the fees for these various things that we're talking about here?
I have it here. It looks like it was, where'd it go? It looked like the annual entertainment license was 25, perhaps?
Dollars?
No, yeah, the single event entertainment license over 100 was 25. The billiard, I don't know, billiard, pool, and Scipio license.
No.
Not gonna be playing pool, are you, Pete?
No pool.
Perfect. Pool or a pond.
That was a big one. That was a big one.
What was the other one, Pete?
50?
I think it was a 75 for the one-day alcohol, 50 for the entertainment, and a 50 for the porta-johns that we have to rent. That was a new one this year.
So I would put an amendment on the motion to waive the fees for the day.
Mr. Kamala, do you have a comment on that?
The Porter Jones permit is issued by a different board.
Okay, so the porta potty, Board of Health?
Yes, Board of Health.
Okay, so we don't have purview to waive that fee?
They've already been paid.
Oh,
I don't know if that is waivable.
all right.
I mean, that's nice to not have to do
Well,
that.
we're a nice
'cause
board, Pete.
You're a very nice board.
So which are we waiving? We're waiving 2 25s, 25, 25, and...
No, a 50 and a 75. Have you paid the 50
Yeah,
and 75?
everything's been paid. I paid a 75, a 50, and a 50.
All right, well, maybe next year, if you come up, we might waive those.
Okay.
It'd be more work to get that back than it's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forget my amendment.
But thank you. You are a very nice board.
Okay, in that case, we tried. There is a motion that has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, that is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. I hope it's a big
Thank you.
success. And Mother Nature is better this year.
Good luck, Pete.
Good luck.
Lisa forgot.
Like with the weather, right?
Okay, so we are doing great on
We're doing
time
great.
here. We are. Comprehensive budget and capital budget hearing. The Board of Selectmen will review the budget and capital requests of the Town Manager, Land Use Department Inspectional Services, Human Resources Department, Town Clerk, Finance Department, and Board of Health. Mr. Khumalo?
Yeah,
do you
through
wanna
the chair,
start?
if you're okay, we might as well start with the town clerk,
Okay.
Board of Health, and then we'll end, and then take human resources, and then end with finance, land use, and town management.
Okay, we'll let them get going. Okay, then let's start with the town clerk, who I see is here.
Thank you very much. So, I've comprised of two budgets, the town clerk budget along with elections and registration. For the town clerk budget, currently, we're looking at a 1.5% increase, which is really just salaries. Most of the regular services and expenses have gone down due to me completing the Clerk Institute. So that's out of the way, and so we don't have those tuition fees anymore, so that was removed from the budget. So realistically, that one doesn't have much of a change to it. Past 2 years, I've submitted a decrease to those budgets, so, you know, hopefully this one won't be a big impact. I don't know if you have any questions on town clerk before we move on to elections and registration.
I'm sure.
Mr. Herr?
So Connor, does that, does your number include what may be submitted to the town meeting for salary for the town clerk position?
That is correct. Currently, it does include what I plan to submit to the town meeting for consideration.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
If there's no further questions on the town clerk portion, I'll just move on briefly to the elections and registration. There's currently a decrease in that all around, not as big of a decrease as we would have usually seen because of the recent increase in the state minimum wage. So we increased the pay for all of our election workers, along with pay equity for the officers that were like wardens and machine inspectors. They all went up $1 as well. So it's still a little bit higher than usually. It drops at about like a 50% drop between, because it kind of goes the roller coaster depending on how many elections are in a given year. So for this coming year, we're going to have just in theory, we'll have just the annual town election as well as the presidential primary in February. And so those are the only scheduled elections so far for the coming fiscal year. The next state primary and presidential election will be in the 2021 fiscal year, so we'll see that spike up again. Right now, this is not anticipating just after this was all submitted, there were some talks in the State House of introducing early voting to presidential primaries. So that's still kind of out there. We don't know what the impact of that could be. But per usual, I do try to keep enough room in our budget to have a special town meeting or election if necessary. But early voting could potentially take up some of that that little bit I save aside for a special town meeting if we have it for the presidential primary. So really, other than that the only line item increase was really just trying to get a couple new pieces of equipment for the hall itself, just a posting board so that we don't damage anything on the lovely green pads in the brown gym there. But otherwise, it's going to be a decrease just for an increase next year, but that's about it.
Any questions, board members?
Never a problem when someone decreases their budget by 21.66%.
I'm always proud of my budgets,
I don't
Brandon.
know why it isn't 23.66, but it's a good starting point.
Next time I'll fire a few people. We'll see what happens.
Okay, well, hearing none, then we're good to go.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Deegan.
Thank you, Connor.
Excellent. Okay.
Pleasure as always.
Thank you. Thank you for hanging in there. Okay, next is the Board of Health. I see Sean out there. Come tell us what you got here.
In fact, as Sean is setting up for his presentation, I want to advise the board that the number that you have in front of you has increased by $63,000, and this is accounting for the salary for a new position, that of a public health nurse.
Okay, so in other words, we're looking right now at 223.16, and you're saying add 66,000 to that?
63.
63. And that was for a salary?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, so.
Good evening. So we are requesting the increase to bring on a full-time public health nurse who would also act as the director of the Medical Reserve Corps. So we would expand our full-time coverage in the department and bring on another full-time employee to assist with the day-to-day activities in the department. And it would further assist me in being able to work a little outside of, or work a little more towards public health development and program development in the town. Because at this point, it's, I'm covering with my contract nurse all of the public health duties.
So what would a nurse do? Is this usual?
The
and how
public
have
health-
you handled it in the past?
The public health nurse would be able to provide vaccination services throughout the year, health clinics. They'd be able to support the senior center with health-related program activities. They would be able to, they'd provide the MAVEN coverage, or the required public health duties. We have a set of duties that are required by the State Department of Public Health to fulfill, and they'd be able to provide those duties, and they would also be able to, in the event we had a health case requiring direct observation therapy, or or special illness issues, they would be able to cover those in lieu of the public health contracted nurse that I have.
So this is enough to warrant an everyday, all-day position, or some of these
Yes, and
things that are
then
usually brought in?
they would be able to
individually?
step in and provide the medical reserve corps setup, and they would be able to provide additional public health-related activities and programming, assisting the school department and several other departments. So there's, right now, I'm providing.
Excuse me for being the first one to jump in, and I'm not meaning to be contrary. I mean, it sounds like we can find all kinds of things that they can provide, but we're talking about a full-time position, which then gets expensive because it comes with all the benefits and all the other things that go on with a full-time. So I'm kind of wondering, how much of these services are essential and have been provided in other ways to the town without creating the kinds of long-term responsibilities that a full-time position does. I know there are a lot of things that could be done, but, are some of these things being met in other ways, whether it's the vaccinations, whether it's a couple times a year a flu clinic, or being done by their private physicians. I guess while I can understand there are good things that could be done, I'm just questioning how much is really needed and how much could be done in a way that wouldn't obligate the town to a long-term, full-term position and all the benefits that go with it.
Understood.
If I may.
Mr. Kamala?
Yeah, it may be helpful, Sean, to explain what we're doing currently, how we're providing for this service, and also relate that to the increasing need in the community, given the mandate of the Board of Health.
So currently, we are contracting out flu clinics. We're contracting out the direct observation therapy services, and we're not able to run or facilitate day-to-day medical services within the town. We could be providing the senior center a full-time person to provide, again, vaccinations. They could be providing blood pressure checks. They could be providing a host of additional services that aren't being provided on a day-to-day basis at the senior center. We could have them provide a set of additional services and programming for the school department. They could provide, assistance with vaping educate or e-cigarette education, with a variety of different other public health type trainings and or educational programming.
Are we required to provide those? I mean, I'm understanding all the stuff we could do. I guess I'm just looking at how much do we need to do? How much is going into what would normally be provided by your position? Or what do we, at what level of health service is the town responsible for? We're not really a health provider. We're a town government. I'm just looking at, I know there's lots of stuff we could do.
Right.
I'm really looking at what we need to do. And what it's going to cost us. That's why I'm still not quite understanding what our obligations are and how this is going to make economic sense for us. I know there's
right now
stuff.
we currently carry a $13,300 line item to cover contracted nursing services, and that if we had, say, 2 or 3 direct observation therapy cases, we could eat through that budget easily with 1 or a couple cases, especially if I had to put someone under quarantine. If I had a full-time nurse, they would be able to take care of the duties that are currently being covered by the contract nurse, and then we'd be able to grow and provide additional, public health programming that we're currently just not able to provide because I'm the only one,
Sure,
covering the department.
Have those incidents happened that often? I mean, is it likely that
I've been here a year and a half, and I've already quarantined one person.
You had what? I'm sorry.
I've already had one person in quarantine.
Uh-huh.
And we had a case recently where we had to, I got mobilized by the state on a Saturday to investigate a case that I had to bring in the contract nurse. And luckily, we resolved it without further issue. But, these are having someone full-time in the department would provide that extra coverage and backup and that expertise that we currently don't have, and that extra service that we're currently not providing. There's a significant amount of work that we could provide the residents of the town if we had a public health nurse. And currently, we don't have an active medical reserve corps. And having someone who is providing both the nursing services and that could step up and provide, the direction to the development or redevelopment of the medical reserve corps, having a nurse who could step in and provide the foodborne illness investigation work instead of, me having to do it all. It would really...
Just one more question, because I jumped in first. How do other communities handle this? Is this the norm? Do most other communities have this, or communities our size?
It's a standard that there's at least a director and a public health nurse. I'd say the majority of local communities in the central region and outside throughout, the Boston area have a public health nurse.
I'm sorry, I jumped right in. Other board members. Mr. Nesrela?
I'm good. You actually asked a number of the questions that I was interested in asking, but thank you.
Who else?
So I have a couple of questions. So can you explain to me what direct observation therapy is?
So if we have we'll use tuberculosis. We have a individual with a case of tuberculosis. The nurse goes to the residents because more often than not, they're under quarantine. And they bring in the medication and they observe the patient taking the requisite medications. And then they record it, it gets recorded with the state, and they come back, if it's typically it's a daily dosage of medication, and they're there every day. And it's typically at least 9 months of medication. So they're providing a daily service, and then it goes to tri or biweekly. And then, the case that I had, it's still being dealt with on the state level. And we provide follow-up, and we sign off. So there's a fair amount of intensive nursing that's being done. And in the case, and that's one thing that, although I'm qualified and trained to address a significant amount of issues within the state system, I cannot provide the nursing services because I'm not a registered nurse.
Okay. So I guess you answered my next question. When you said you've had somebody quarantined, you kind of housed them in place at their house? And
yes, and they were very receptive, and that's a tribute. They really assisted the department.
And as far as doing vitals and flu clinics, I know firsthand that you have I know of two people for sure that are registered nurses that work down the senior center, that volunteer down the senior center to do vitals and to do flu clinics and things like that. I'm having a hard time swallowing that we need to bring on a full-time nurse right now, where I think that we can maybe do something, maybe per diem, maybe what'd you say, it was $63,000 for the full-time nurse?
That's what we're estimating the,
And it's, you said you spent, you had a line item for 13, so it would be net 50?
But then you had all the benefits.
Yeah,
going
I know,
forward.
So I would suggest for you to look into a per diem style system for these nurses. You know, I know that we don't need to offer vital signs to be done every day down the senior center. I know that, you know, we have some nurses that are hang around down there that do the vitals, flu clinics. It's hard for me to justify $50,000 additional dollars for something like this, where, you know, the nurses that are down there would probably be willing to jump in for free lunch at Bill's or wherever to do this flu clinic. If we weren't up against it budget-wise, you know, trying to watch every nickel and dime, then I would maybe think that a new nurse, you know, a full-time nurse would be the way to go. But working in that industry, I know that the per diem pools out there are strong. There are people that would love to come in and do stuff like that on a per diem basis, where we wouldn't have to be covering their benefits and OPEB and things like that, and that would be qualified. I mean, any nurse with a license, whether it be an LPN or RN or nurse practitioner, certainly can administer flu vaccinations and take vital signs. As a matter of fact, I think people you know, with a certain level of first aid could come in and volunteer. It doesn't have to be people that are down there at the senior center. I know that we have a firefighter. You know, when you talk about the medical, what is that, the medical?
Medical Reserve Corps.
So we have a firefighter that's a medic as well as a registered nurse, that maybe we could approach him and see if he'd be interested in taking a role in that, and maybe we'd have to give him a little additional stipend or open it up to people that are qualified like that to take the helm. People that are full-time town employees already, that maybe they'd be, you know, with a small stipend, it would be resume building, and maybe it'd be something they'd be interested in. So I don't want to say that I'm speaking for the whole board. I say for me right now, I don't think that right now is the right time to present a full-time nurse.
And if I may,
okay,
through the chair, Mr. Tedstone, I believe your comment regarding looking at perhaps meeting this need in a different way is well taken. Let me share with you that I've been with the town for 10 years, and I've been discussing with the Board of Health this topic for many, many years. There have been other attempts to bring this position online and on board, but again, based on the reason that you offer, budget constraints, we were not able to do so. So overall, I think the discussion regarding the need has been in front of us for a while now. Secondly, I have been part of different initiatives looking at bringing this service to the town in some form. For example, at one point we looked at collaborating with other towns to see if we could collaborate with Ashland. I think it was Medway and Hollystone. We could not find a nurse who was interested in that option. There are many other options for qualified nurses in the state. And then we have also been relying, until recently we were relying on the VNA, and without notice they dropped that service and the town was left without...
What service?
VNA, Visiting Nurses Associations. Yeah. So again, your point is well taken in terms of looking at other options for meeting this need. However, I can share with the board that I've been with the town for 10 years, and for a large part of the 10 years, we've been looking at different ways of bringing this service to the town. It's now coming down to, if the town is to meet this need, we need to have somebody on board. Will it be full-time, 40 hours, or some graduated presence in town, I think it's worth looking into. However, other options have not worked. VNA dropped us without notice. We tried to collaborate with other towns. It did not work. We brought in an intern from Boston University to work with us. Did not work. Brought in an intern from Worcester State University. It did not work. Nurses have other options that are more attractive, per diem nurses that are more attractive than what we offer here.
So can you explain to me what a VNA would do in the role of, like, what have we hired VNAs to do in the past?
What do they do?
So the VNA, the Natick VNA provided exactly what my current contract VNA is doing. They simply respond to the MAVEN, the cases that the Mass Department of Public Health assigns to the town that we have to respond to. And they provide those RN services that, you know, because I'm not a nurse, I'm not qualified to address. So they, you know, Natick, as you know, the town manager indicated, they dropped us without really any
The
prior
Natick
notice.
VNA?
It was Natick.
Yeah.
Well, they disbanded.
And they stopped
That's why they
providing
dropped you.
services.
I can give you a list of about 50
Right.
VNAs if you need.
Right.
I would also be willing to, offline, kind of help coordinate getting us through in a Band-Aid type situation, as far as getting the nurses that you have that are volunteering down the senior center. I could mobilize them and maybe get them in a more expanded role for whatever type of training they need, or whatever. But I'd be glad to help out any way I can. But I just, I don't think that this is the right time to do something like that.
And currently, I mean, we have a VNA providing the MAVEN-specific services. However, you know, we don't have the ability to provide anything beyond that.
Yep.
And that's, again, you know, we're looking to fill that void and provide, you know, just additional service and opportunity to the residents in
So
Hopkinton.
when somebody has tested positive for TB or something like that, I would think that at some point their private insurance would kick in and the onus would be on that individual to take care of their own issues.
But the Board of Health is responsible for providing that direct observation therapy service.
Okay.
So it's, the medication is covered.
Yeah.
But we have to provide.
We have to watch them take it.
Right.
Yep. No, I deal with it in one of the other
Right.
positions that I work at. It's a state-run facility. And we have people on there that are they have to take these 4 horse pills every 4 hours on the hour.
Right.
Like, I get it.
Yeah.
I can't back the nurse position. I can, however, offer to help you out in any way that I can, whether it's finding the right people for the right spots or volunteering myself to help out in any way that I can, so.
Mr. Kamal?
Just one last piece. There was also mention of the Medical Reserve Corps. I can tell you, I work with Chief Clark. I've been working with Chief Selectmen. We have people in town who are ready to be part of the Medical Reserve Corps. We don't have a body, either in the fire department or in the Board of Health, to coordinate that activity in town.
And that,
Have we gone to the people in town that are qualified to do that?
Yeah, we have people in town who are stand ready to volunteer and help.
Yeah. So we have a full-time employee that works for the fire department, that is a medic as well as a registered nurse. So have we reached out to him to say, can we give you a stipend, we're trying to get this kicked off, and
We have not done that specific, but we have worked through the fire chiefs.
and I'm not saying that
We-
person
yeah.
he may or may not have interest in that.
Yeah.
But I just know that we do have someone with those qualifications in town that we could maybe give a stipend to rather than a salary to.
Yeah. It may also be helpful, that point is well taken. We will follow up with the chief to see if that is possible. However, again, it needs to be said, we are looking at our emergency preparedness plans. The Medical Reserve Corps is a key component of that process, we have been looking for opportunities to get this going. We have people who are standing ready to assist in that regard. What we don't have is somebody here at a town hall to coordinate the effort. I also need to mention, I do meet regularly with the Board of Health Director as well as the Chair of the Board of Health. I think it needs to be said that the town has done very well, and we have very capable individuals who have been helping us on a part-time basis. However, when we look at the long-term sustainability of that model, it doesn't serve the town very well. There is a process that the Board of Health has embarked on that will begin now to institutionalize and regularize the services that are provided by the department. They do a fantastic job with great people who are capable, who are doing this work, but long term, I think based on my conversations with the director and the chair, they've identified that the town needs to have at least a stable structure that can support the key functions or the key mandates of the Board of Health. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, whether the Board of Health has discussed this publicly. It would be helpful for the board, so that at least the board has an understanding as to where is this heading to.
So I hate to take an hour of time on $50,000 on a $90 million budget.
Yeah.
But this is just, it's my point of view, and I'm not voting for everybody else. You don't have to try to sell me on this. I've kind of made up my mind.
So if you're out, can I ask a couple?
Go ahead, I'm done.
Mr. Herb, please.
So that was going to be one of my questions. So the Board of Health has deliberated this position.
Yes.
What did the Board of Health vote?
The Board of Health voted on the 28th of January to approve
But help me with the politics. Did they vote unanimously?
Yes.
Okay, so the Board of Health, our elected colleagues, looked at this, I think thoroughly, I assume thoroughly, it's their
Yes.
job, and they've said we need this position. Secondly, the Medical Reserve Corps, is that a statutory organization at the state level? Or is it some kind of national volunteer, state volunteer system?
I don't believe it's a statutory, but it's a state and national, coordinated program that we are simply unable to.
And we've had people in that position here in town before. So
Yeah,
Lisa Jackson served as
Exactly,
their
Lisa,
Medical
exactly, yeah.
Reserve Corps person at some time, years back. I don't think she's been doing it for a while. So we have had people in that position. I don't know if we paid them or not.
Lisa represents the boots on the ground group. The town was not paying them. What I think we're saying is when we have ready teams of people willing to do this work, should a need arise in town, we need somebody to coordinate that effort. Asking the director to do that, asking the part-time inspector to do that would not serve the town well.
And the 50,000 you're referring to is taking the 63 for the position, backing out the contractual or contract work that we have now, and that's out to 50 grand. Okay. All right. And is this $50,000 number, although you've added this kind of in this discussion tonight, is this in the presentations of the budgets we've had overall?
No, my thinking was, let's socialize the idea with the board tonight, and then at the next meeting, I will then present a budget that incorporates all the changes that the board has been discussing and have come through other town boards and committees.
So overall, we've got a $90 million budget, right? And we have certain buckets we've got to fill. And whether we fill this bucket with 450 grand, or we fill this bucket with 475 grand, we move 25 grand from here to there, I don't really think we need to get into the weeds of that so much. So when you bring this budget back to us, the $90 million, whatever it is, you're going to have this 50 grand in there. Is the tax impact that you showed us last time going to be changing?
It will be changing. There are several adjustments that will be made. There are numbers that are going down. There are some numbers like this number that are going up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's really, I think, where I think we need to spend, that's where I think we need to spend our time is, what is the overall tax impact to the residents? And you can back out the 50 grand if you want to back it out, but I'm more concerned with taking the excess levy and a couple of other things as I am to this, which isn't gonna really move that needle a whole lot. But I hear what you're saying.
And if I may, I mean, we have, you know, a changing demographic, an expanding population. And, I mean, there is need to address, you know, this change. And there are opportunities for the department to partner with, you know, the pantry, with the school system, you know, more so with the fire department. So there is there's I would say an unmet need, simply because I don't have the time to.
So my position, Sean, is whenever our colleagues, other elected officials in the community, volunteers like ourselves, spend a lot of time on something and say, yep, we should do this, I tend to defer to them. And then I look at him and say, okay, figure out how to pay for it, because I don't want to raise taxpayer money. Right, so that's an easy way for me to do it, but it's kind of my philosophy. I don't want to question what you and your Board of Health think is important for the community, because you guys are much better at it than I would ever be. But, I mean, he can speak to it differently, he's a nurse. But also, we have a problem with, in my mind, excess levy takings this year that I don't want to take, and I'm going to keep going back to that. I want to take that 1% back out of the budget somehow. If we're going to put this 50 grand in, then something else is going to have to give, so we'll figure it out.
I'm good.
You know, I will just wrap up in saying, I mean, I started the discussion, so I think it's not a surprise that I'm kind of going down on Ms. Headstone's side. I do recognize that the Board of Health may have approved it, but I don't think that the Board of Health members are there looking at the bottom line the same way this board is. You mentioned a whole lot of wonderful, great things that we could do this, could do that, and I'm sure the Board of Health sees that as well, and sees for their mission, gee, wouldn't this be great, there's all these good things that we could get. That doesn't necessarily mean that board I think is probably more looking at the benefit side and not at the cost side. And I know that 50,000 is not going to move the needle, but every little expenditure, they add up after a while, and after a while, you do move the needle. And my problem here, again, is another full-time position, and it translates to a lot more than just the initial salary. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And when we look at our budgets, we try to figure how can we control our costs. There's so much that's just contractual that cannot be reduced because they're employees and benefits, and the benefits in the OPEB. So I'm just kind of instinctively, since I've been on this board, gotten to be very hesitant about adding full-time positions, particularly for things that would be good to have, or we could do. This is a great thing. I want to look back at the core of what we really need to do. And so, you know, I'm just not sold right now.
Let's play this out, right? And people get mad at me when I do this, but what the heck?
If there's another way, I'd like to look at the other way.
We got to balance out $90 million budget, whatever the number's going to be.
50,000 is a
think about the
drop
tax
in the bucket.
impact, and again, the excess levy and all that stuff. If we start messing with other elected boards' positions that they suggest they need to do their job and for their team to do their job, and they don't like that, they're just going to go to town meeting. This is where I get yelled at. They're just going to go to town meeting and throw an amendment on the floor at the budget time, and then we're going to have a big mess on our hands. So that's why I try not to get involved in the day-to-day operations and staffing of departments. I say to Mr. Kamalo, you want 50 grand? Fine. You're not getting another penny of tax dollars, though. Make it happen. Figure it out. Let him worry about that. But when we start staffing for other elected boards and committees and for teams within the organization that we're not really responsible for, we open ourselves up to stuff on town meeting floor that can get ugly. And we could have a hard time balancing the books that night, too.
And there's opportunity for a full-time public health professional to bring in additional grant work and to provide assistance to the senior center with respect to elderly feeding and other health-related programming. That's
Think of it in these terms. Sorry, Sean. Think of it in these terms. We're adding right now in the budget 2 or 3 firefighters 2 or 3 police officers, I think teens of teachers. I mean, there's all kinds of people coming because the town's growing. You know, to pick on one department that's also managed by a duly elected board, I don't think is the way that this board should conduct its business.
So, Mr. Hurry, your point is well taken, and I did not mean to get into the day-to-day operations of the Board of Health. I'm not a Board of Health guy. I don't focus on the Board of Health or things like that.
But you're a nurse, and you get...
Yeah, I happen to be, somewhat up to date. I would give myself credit to be up to date in issues like this. And I don't mean to get involved in running your day-to-day operations. It's just that I had, in what was presented, I have a little bit of background in there, and I'm not trying to be self-serving or anything like that. I just, when I look at some of the asks, $50,000, it could be a teacher.
Right.
It could be, a half a firefighter, it could be a half a cop, it could be part of a DPW employee. And when we as a board try to figure out want versus need, I just try to figure out, I'm trying to keep our overall number low. So when we start doing some of these cuts that we're going to inevitably have to do, it makes it a little bit easier. So I stand by what I said, but I don't want you to think that I'm trying to run your day-to-day operations. I'm not.
No. And I'm
Selectmen 4 hours a night, 2 or 3 times a month.
Right.
And I have a lot of business cards that double as toothpicks, and that's as far as it goes. I'm not a Board of Health guy, I'm not a firefighter, I'm not a cop, selectman, so.
All right, I'll speak up. So I do believe that, delegation is part of what we're supposed to do. When we have an elected board, we should be listening to you. I guess the one question I have is, are there services that are not being met?
I would argue that we could have been ahead of the game on the e-cigarette issue. We're looking at between 15 and 28% of our students using e-cigarettes. Given the tight budget on the school side, a public health nurse could have been providing, and liaisoning with those public health nurses, and it could have kept us ahead of the game. There's additional, again, there are additional, programs that we could be providing to, the residents up at Legacy North, or other services we could be providing to, the seniors that are, having troubles, meeting their food needs. And these are the different, right now, what the department is doing is we're responding, we're reacting to problems that pop up. Mm-hmm. And that's really the gist of, I guess, this whole argument is, do we continue to react, or do we start to, be proactive and start developing programs and putting these, these plans and projects in place where we can better provide, health service to the residents? And that's really what the argument comes down to is it's our ability to start being a little more proactive on the health department side.
So I think that's one of the things that I like about, our fire department, our police department, is that they are looking forward and trying to determine what our needs are and how do we meet those needs. Again, I tend to defer to the elected board that is making the request. I'm interested in hearing the argument and hearing why you're asking for the position, and I'm also interested in hearing the positions of everyone else on this board. And I think everyone's made a very good, strong point, but I guess deference to the elected board is kind of where I go.
Where are we? Are we to be taking a vote on this, Mr. Kamalo, or simply just giving feedback?
Giving feedback, I will present a revised budget to the board ahead of your next meeting.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we've all expressed our feelings of some hesitancy and certainly respecting what you people do.
Definitely.
But, you know, keeping an eye on as Mr. Ted Stone said, needs versus wants, and just taking that all into account. Just very quickly, I see there is, if there are no other questions on the budget, I see there is one capital request from Board of Health for $31,820 for software system. Is that right?
Yeah, in fact, I think the board should withhold its discussion on this issue. The reason being, IT has assembled several permitting departments in town to see how we could proceed collaboratively in pursuing this venture, and that will include the requests from the Board of Health.
All right, so we're not going to discuss this now then?
No.
Okay? All right. Sorry to keep you so long. Thank you, Sean. All right. Fine, and next I see Maria Casey is here for the Human Resources Department. Maria, come up and have a word with us. We'll try to be nice to you.
We spent so much money on the renovation of this place, and it'd be so cold here right now.
I say, like, some of these windows are horrible.
It's the windows.
I don't know why the windows don't shut properly.
Feel the breeze.
Windows are about 50 grand.
There's no reason to move.
Brandon,
Apparently not.
the water didn't flow this way.
No, it should have.
There was no reason.
Hi, Maria.
Capital improvement.
I know.
Windows.
We have new windows. They just aren't weather's
Maria.
or something.
Hi, how are
Maria.
you? Hi, how are you?
Cold.
I can relate.
Okay. So, what have we got here? Let's see. Our 2020 is $647,960.75. Okay. Up a bit. So, want to tell us anything about your budget? Or I know you've gone up quite a bit. I gather we've got a lot new employees and all that takes resources.
Correct. So the increase in budget was a request for a dedicated benefits administrator. At my budget submission, I was using prior year figures, between the town report, et cetera, which goes calendar year, but we currently have 287 town employees, including full-time, part-time, seasonal, per diem. We have 202 retirees. We help manage the senior worker program, which is through the abatement process. And, essentially, I would say on any given day, I'm responsible for approximately 1,200 employees and all their loved ones' benefits. That's why I've got the request for the benefits administrator. The current HR generalist is managing that, and it is a very big job, and so I don't get help on employee matters, compensation, classification, all of those other things, because it's a full-time position.
Okay.
In fact, if I may add, through the chair. One of the reasons I supported increasing staff in the HR office is to account for the services that we provide to the school department. Employee experience is very important for us here at Town Hall, and given the time that Maria and her team are spending responding to issues coming from school retirees, that's taking away from the direct service that we would like to provide to our current employees. So my discussion with her is that so long as we continue to provide support to school teacher, to retired school personnel, we would like to have somebody helping us in the benefits area, and that's why I supported Maria's request.
Any questions from the board?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Good.
All right, then we're all good. I guess you can go home and keep warm.
Great. Ironically enough, I don't have electricity, so.
Have you talked about,
Not till
Dr. Brown about
tomorrow.
maybe going solar?
I think I'm out of his area.
Short conversation here.
I think I'm out of Brian's area, though,
Yep.
Maria, oh my goodness.
up in the boonies.
You get it
Just
back
trying to get me
soon.
to get up and leave before.
No quorum, we gotta go home.
Make it be even colder just thinking about it.
Thanks, Maria.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Okay, that's HR, and now let's see, finance. So, finance. Finance.
Yeah.
We will do finance next.
Mr. Kamala, while they're coming up, if I could ask a question, please?
Yes, please do.
The Board of Health budget previous to tonight had about a $60,000 increase in it year over year proposed. Is that additional, then you're saying we're adding another $60,000 additional tonight with this position? Does that make sense, or was that somehow already worked into that number prior? Because I picked up on it last time in my very professional notes here. There was a $60,000 increase year over year. So I think it might have already been in there.
It was not. However, we're going to continue to work, based on the comments we received from the board, we're going to continue to work with Sean to see what number do we actually introduce to the FY20 budget, if we
Okay,
decide
but
to
just
do so.
check what we saw before, because
Yes.
there was a spike already for some other reason.
Yep.
Or I could have picked up on the wrong columns year over year, but I did pick up on $60,000. Thank you.
It's okay.
Mr. O'Leary.
Good evening.
Evening.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks, nice to be back so soon. The Finance Department budget's very straightforward. About 80% of it is staff salaries, and about 10% of it is contracted appraisal services for complex cases. The remaining 10% is postage, the annual financial audit, and supplies and training. We're fortunate that our office space is funded by the Town Facilities Department, and our technology is funded by the IT Department. Our most significant tool is Munis, and that was purchased in previous periods, so this is a pretty straightforward budget. The town manager's finance budget submission shows a 9.8% overall increase, a rise of $102,000 on a base of $1,040,000. About 80% of that increase is personnel costs, and 20% is for complex case appraisal support, mostly the Eversource LNG facility reassessment and a planned look at cell towers as an assessment target for this coming year. On the staffing side, this budget annualizes the costs of having a CFO, a separate town accountant, and a procurement and grants manager. The FY19 budget was a transition year with an acting CFO on a part-time hourly basis. So this is really the first year you're seeing the budget implication of the decision to upstaff finance a couple of years ago. So that's basically where we are with this budget.
6 weeks in, I want to take opportunity to share some impressions with you from my 6-week tenure with the town. I'd like to talk to you about the strengths the department has. First of all, we have a very capable and motivated finance staff. We can really do a lot with this team, a lot of opportunities. Likewise, Munis is a capable system, and we have very good IT support. Our budget formulation process, which you're involved in right now, is very sound, and I think it could benefit from a longer time horizon, especially when it comes to capital and debt planning. It seems that the horizon is maybe a little shorter than it could be for the kind of perspective and the kind of issues you're talking about in your discussion. We have many sound business practices in place, and the day-to-day business of the town is getting done. So that's really the good news, and it's good news. There are several areas for improvement. Key business processes lack documentation, which I think is common in many organizations and many smaller organizations. We have it as an audit finding, and it applies not just to finance, but probably more broadly across the town, that people do a good job at work on an expert-based process, but we haven't really documented processes to routinize activities, and that's an important thing. An audit finding and my own observation. Many of the processes that we have require improvement. We should be looking at benchmarking best practices, achieving consistency across the town in areas like cash handling and capital planning. So far we have a list going, and we've identified 42 business processes that we would really like to tune up and look at starting a continuous improvement process on documenting and formalizing a little better. We still use many paper-based and email processes, and those are inherently inefficient and error-prone. We're not really taking full advantage of all the modules in Munis that would allow us to automate those processes, and that's something we can do with an investment we've already made. So most of our important processes could either use some improvement or documentation, but at the front of the line, we have a number of audit findings that have to be addressed. So in this year's audit letter that we're expecting shortly, we've seen the draft and we've been collaborating on the draft. We have been called to task for our investment reporting. I believe we should have transparent posted status of our investments all the time so that you or me or any citizen could go to our webpage and see what the status of our investments are. We don't really have that right now. We do cash management in a lot of places, and we do it differently everywhere. The senior center does it differently than the library, does it differently than the treasurer's office. There's probably a best practice we should be moving to for cash management, another audit finding. We have an audit finding on capital asset documentation. So we think the liabilities number on the balance sheet is pretty good, quite good. We think the income statement is excellent. But the base assets that we have booked need further documentation to be compliant. So that's going to be a project we're going to have to get to in the near term. We've been criticized about the student activity fund levels at the schools. As of today, we checked, and there's about $350,000 in student activity funds held at the middle school and the high school. There haven't been any problems, but the auditors consider it a risk to have a separate fund held in checking accounts at the schools. So we want to provide some leadership to improve and institutionalize processes that'll make sure we never have to explain why student money has a problem. Another risk area that the auditors identified. We have an issue with police billings for details when police officers get hired out for traffic and other details. Again, in our audit letter, we're going to have to tune that up a little bit. And the auditors have recommended that we review our vendor files so that we clean up that area and make sure we're validating everyone we're doing business with to improve that payment area. So audit findings are really warnings, but repeated findings kind of signal indifference on the part of the organization. So we really don't want to be indifferent to these findings. We want to take them very seriously and address them. And I think they're representative of weaknesses generally in our operating approach, but I think the great news is we can easily address these weaknesses. There will probably be some costs in future years tied to resolving some issues. Going back and getting a good asset value for the high school or the middle school is probably going to be a bit of a challenge, and we're going to need some support to do that. But a lot of these things we can do ourselves. I also think we have a lot of great opportunities to do better as a finance department to support the town. A lot of our focus is on reporting in a compliance-based way. The reports that the state requires us to produce that we include in the town report, statements out, and we certainly have to be compliant. But we should add a greater focus on reporting for decision support, using data that we have to support decision-making by you, the town meeting, the other elected boards, and the finance department can play a real role in that. I think another opportunity we have is to link budgeting and performance metrics so that we can really tell the value proposition story of the town. Several of the I've come to all these meetings, and I hear several of the department heads get up and start to bring in metrics about library visitors, about crime statistics, about response times, and that's really good organic work being done throughout all the departments. We'd really like to help coordinate a better approach to that so that we're presenting one common operating picture for the town that relates spending and performance and helps us all understand the value proposition that we have here, the great value proposition and the good news story that we have. The finance team is also focusing on the stakeholder experience. We really touch two groups of people. We work with the town departments, and we want to deliver more value by making it easier and faster and cheaper for them to do their work. So when I hear department heads say that they have trouble executing a procurement or resolving a billing, that's an opportunity for us to serve the other departments better, and we're very focused on that. Likewise, we want to make it faster, easier, and cheaper for taxpayers and suppliers to do business with us. A great opportunity to get out and touch the community in a better way. I would say we also could do some work on improving the town's long-term planning horizon. For example, the Sewer Enterprise Fund is experiencing major fluctuations in commercial use, and we have lower than expected residential signups. So that started years ago, and the gap is widening. And I think our group has the skill set to help develop a plan to rectify that problem. Something we're very interested in doing. Likewise, the ambulance service has costs and billings that are operating in a very complex way where we get reimbursed from insurance. It's not exactly clear what the subsidy is that's going to ambulance service. It's not really clear that we're doing everything we could do for billing. I think the fire department's doing a great job. Part of what the finance department should do is step in and help in those situations. Help with some of the analytical work to make that operation better, not just sit in our office and collect bills and check our inboxes. Finally, capital planning, very high consequence area. When I was a budget officer in the Coast Guard, we would buy a ship and keep it for 50 years. So if you decided to bring on a ship with 170 crew members, you had to pay 170 people for 50 years. And I became really sensitized to the importance that capital planning has for long-term operating budgets. I think the other piece of that is deferred maintenance. Inherently, when you decide to slip or accelerate capital acquisitions, it has an impact on deferred maintenance. You had a discussion some weeks ago about the appropriate level of the roads, the road index. Nobody wants 100% road index, but you don't want a road index so bad that you're overspending to fix the roads in expensive ways and in fully reconstructive ways. So I think we have the staff and ability to contribute in that area. So in summary, I think we have a great team. We have good technology. We have direction from the town manager. My second week, I had a list of 74 things to work on, and my list is growing. So I have plenty to do. We can make a credible start on the audit findings this year. So if we go through the end of 19 and have all the same findings, that's a very bad thing. And I think we can begin to address many of the existing findings this year. I'm sure we can close them all out by the end of 2020. So my objective is to show good progress in 19 and to address all the auditor-identified challenges by the end of 2020. And I think that with support, with direction from the town manager, within 3 years, by the end of 2023, we can really have an exceptional operation that is not just doing work and doing it well, but is providing value to the taxpayer, supporting the other departments, and operating a finance department other people will benchmark.
Excellent. Thank you. Comments from the board?
I'm all set.
6 weeks in.
6 weeks in.
6 weeks in, you did a pretty good presentation right there.
Well, thanks. I made a lot of promises, and I'm an under-promise, over-deliver guy, so I think I didn't promise anything I can't deliver on.
So it certainly seems like you've hit the floor running, so.
Thank you.
I appreciate your enthusiasm and your hopefully your ability to get things righted.
It's great to be here. It's a great opportunity.
Mr. Herr?
I'm a little surprised to hear, and thank you, very excellent presentation. I'm a little surprised to hear, though, that the auditors weighing in on the schools and their budgets, when the Mass General Law protects them and their budgets. I don't understand that. Help me with that.
And that's, yeah.
No, it's the student activity fund. Is that?
Yeah, I think overall, here's the answer. The town accountant is the accountant for the whole town. There are responsibilities, duties that are defined by law that the town accountant performs on behalf of the whole town. And that's when an auditor comes in, they are auditing the town's accounts. That includes both town departments and the school department.
And likewise, the
Okay,
treasurer
so that-
collector.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Let's talk about reality.
Yeah.
So have we talked to our colleagues at the schools about this?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
clearly.
they're- And they feel they're in the loop and it's all that?
They have, we've made a proposal on how to address it, and they are working on a counter proposal, and we'll sit down with those two proposals, and then, if necessary, we'll bring the auditor into the room. And I really am looking forward to a collaborative, cooperative relationship with the schools. We have the same goals. We don't want the prom to be interrupted. We don't want the ski club to get stuck in Austria. We don't want the band to be stuck in New Orleans, but we need to be compliant. We need to drive the risk out, and we can do those things.
I totally agree, but we have a long and storied history in town of making sure that us and the schools collaborate, to use your word, I love that word, carefully, because in the past, we've had times when that didn't happen, and it became very stressful for a lot of people, us included, and I'm really not in the mood to get into one of those contests again. So please be careful there and collaborate, to your point. I think that's great.
Sure.
Second comment I would make, that I've heard a couple of times now, it came out of a meeting about a month or so back when we first got here, so not you at all, just us. The tax rate, the mill rate, and that whole discussion about the value of properties and everything has stirred a little passion in town. I personally have seen some spikes in houses that, if I'm looking at real estate a lot these days, where it's going from 18 at 397,000 to 19 it's 487,000, like that. So we're gonna get a phone call on that one, I'm sure, wherever that is. But I've also had business people ask me about what's going on with the mill rate and what's going on with the valuations, and how can people just arbitrarily make these decisions and say that our taxes aren't going up because the mill rate's going down, when in fact there's going to be dollars coming out of their pockets. We all know that. So I think we have to, I didn't fully understand all that was discussed a few weeks back, but as we get through this budget process, Mr. Kamalo, and we get ready to go into the fall when we set the rates, we just got to make sure everybody understands what's going on, because there seems to be a general confusion about that.
In fact, if I may, if I may, through the chair, one of the 42 plus items that the CFO team has already worked on was how do we address that question squarely? And Tim, you can speak to what you've put in place in terms of how we inform the public of changes that are made. Yeah.
Certainly. So the first thing we're trying...
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
tonight's budget, I don't want to get into all this right now, just kind of throwing some things out there that we need to be ready for as we go through this budget process. We got other things we got to get into, so.
It's a great workshop topic, and I've seen other communities have workshops on how the budget relates to the tax rate, and, people can tune in and do kind of a working session where you really grind through it and bring in a whiteboard and do it. So that's a possibility, if it's something you're interested in.
I fully get it.
Yes, sir.
It's the community that is trying to figure it out right now based on what was discussed a few weeks ago and some dialogue that people are having amongst themselves at the chamber and elsewhere about rates and valuations changing overnight. And they're like, what the heck's going on here? My car just doubled. That doesn't make sense. So, and that's why I said 4 weeks ago, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, because that's an October, November issue. Right. We got to figure out how much more to spend first.
Yes, sir.
But I'm just, as we're having a quick dialogue here, I'm just concerned that that's going to be something that's going to get to be a bigger topic as we go forward.
Hey, Madam Chair, sir, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to start working on that, and as we can iteratively discuss what a good way to bring those issues out and to get them in front of the people, that's exactly what we want to do. No surprises.
That's great.
And I would just say, all those items you just identified that need to be addressed, just identifying them is a huge step in the right direction. If they haven't been identified before, we need to recognize what we need to do first before we can fix it. So from the schools to all your other items, that's a big step in the right direction, just to have found these areas. I don't know what you're going to do after you get all that fixed.
Continuous improvement.
Just to comment. No, just to comment on the valuations. I don't know if other board members saw, there was some charts and graphs that came through from Mass DLS, Division of Local Services, a couple days ago about the change in equalized valuations between 2016 and 2018. And if it's probably in your emails, if you haven't looked at it, take a look at it. They were stunning to see between 2016 and 2018, outside of the Metro Boston, Suffolk County, the Middlesex County was the highest jump in valuations of all the counties in Massachusetts. There was a band of...
And we were on the bottom of that jump.
Yeah, there was like the worst of the worst, and we were in the worst of the worst band, or best of the best, depending how you look at it. And then within those, I think there were 4 or 5 communities. We were the highest among those 4 or 5 counties. It was Middlesex. So, I mean, it doesn't make anybody feel any better. But when you look at what's happening in the region, we are just in an area that has just had a huge spike in real estate values, and it was stunning. So go back and look at that DLS thing if you have a minute.
So I just noted, we've had a couple of years in the last decade where the rates have gone down because values have risen more than the need for new revenue, and values have dropped. Now, in those years, people still paid a few % more, but the rate went down.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to drive people away from the discussion of the rate and more to describing them of the equation of their value and their rate, because that's really what they're going to pay on.
And I think to Mr. Hurst's point about a lot of the comments going around town and people being concerned and not understanding, somewhere along the budget process, it would be really nice to have Mr. O'Leary come in and kind of do an open forum where we talk about this and explain some of these things for people to see, because there are a lot of questions and it's hard to understand. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just add one more comment. When the assessors do this work very aggressively, their perception is that the more robust job they do, the fairer it is. That if they do it as completely as they can do, and as professionally as they can do, even if the values go up, the rate adjusts and it stays as fair as it can be, and that's their objective.
Yeah. Excellent.
I think at the end of the day, though, the taxpayers don't care if it's the rate, the value, the X, the Y, the Z, the P, or the Q. How many dollars do they have to pay?
That's right.
And we have to talk about it in terms of dollars, and dollars increasing. Other than that, they just get frustrated, and then they yell at me at a certain location down the street. So I just think we want to make sure we're conscious of their dollars.
Sure.
Because that's what really pushes the buttons.
And you focused on that at the last hearing, and I think your point of segregating the dollars to the base taxpayers, the dollars coming from the growth, and then the change in the levy limit, those are the three pots, and you homed right in on it. And so there are three distinct pots, and we have that information, and we should be talking in those terms.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very
Thanks.
much for that great report and update. Thank you, Tim. Okay. And finally, we have Land Use Department Inspection Services. Who is going to speak to that? Name? You can stay right where you are.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to remind everyone that the Land Use Department was created about 9 years ago, merged together a number of different offices and boards, including planning, conservation, zoning, building, community preservation, and historic resources. And currently, at last count, we're serving 14 different boards and committees at any given moment. So that's a lot, and most of those have a staff person, one or two staff people attending a meeting to facilitate that meeting and to prepare for that meeting. So the department focuses on planning, permitting, and protecting the long-term safety and health of the community by the building permits, making sure that everything complies with the building code and so forth. For the department's budget, we are looking to continue what we've been doing, and we are hoping to add an additional part-time position for zoning enforcement. And this is something that the community has needed for a while. Right now, it's the responsibility of the Director of Municipal Inspections and the Assistant Building Inspector. But as you know, there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of building, there's a lot of permitting, there's a lot of inspecting going on. And so the time to spend on zoning enforcement, whether it be signs or noise complaints or setback questions, plan reviews, reviewing Board of Appeals applications, those things, it's hard to find the time, especially when it's competing with building-related things. So we estimate that position would be about $36,000. The other change to the budget is moving my salary into the town manager's budget, so that's why you see a decrease in the salary line. That's a net change. And also, we're decreasing the expenses a little bit. We had some money in this year's budget for some consultant services and some land management activities. Given the budget message, we're taking some of that out for this next year, but leaving enough in, we think, sufficient to still cover some of those costs. So that's where we stand.
And in fact, through the chair, part of that money may go towards supporting the work of the recently constituted Trails Coordination and Management Committee.
Another committee to add to the list.
Yeah.
Right.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Hurd?
So, Mr. Kamal, the town manager's office budget went up $100,000 and the land use development budget went down $100,000, is that correct?
Not about the same,
About
because we're
60.
adding in the other position.
Yes.
The part-time position. So it's a net.
Yeah.
Net 40.
Net 40, okay, got it. Okay. Thank you.
All set? Everybody?
So that's a net increase of 40?
It's overall, it's probably an increase because we're adding a part-time position.
Okay.
Okay. All right. No other comments? Good on that. And we will move on to the town manager.
My favorite.
Who would be presenting that? Mr. Kamal.
In fact, thanks to the assistant town manager, she already explained the town manager's budget.
Okay.
Yeah, the increase in the personnel services is due to moving the assistant town manager salary to the town manager budget, as well as increases in expenses for advertising, office supplies, related to industry costs for the named commodities. The town manager is also responsible for the town hall budget, which is budget 192. As well as budget 199.
General.
And then budget number 543, I should explain, this is in relation to the veterans budget. Our chapter 115 demands have gone up. In fact, FY19 will be adjusting the amount required to fund the chapter 115 expenses. And so the budget going forward reflects the increase in the chapter 115 needs, as well as the increase in the town's assessment. You'll recall that Hopkinton is part of a 4-town consortium, and each town pays towards the operating budget of the district, including Ashland, Hopkinton, Medway, and Holliston. And so our assessment is going up. We advised about 2 weeks ago, Dave, that number is going up. And then benefits, as I indicated when I presented the budget, the huge jump is due to the projected increases to the health insurance line item, as well as the general insurance item, owing to the new buildings that have come online in town.
Okay. Any members? Any questions? Okay. All right. Then that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Kamalo.
Thank you.
So, that, I believe, concludes the budget hearings. The only capital request was the one from Board of Health, which is not going to be, we're going to defer that, or I guess that's going to go under IT right now, so, okay.
Madam Chair, what is the rest of our schedule for talking about the budget overall?
Part of tonight, as well as the board's next meeting on the 5th. At that point, the board will need to make a decision on the budget that is forwarded to the Appropriations Committee.
So, I mean, a huge driver in the increase every year is the health insurance. It's a $600,000 increase year over year projected right now. Where are we in mitigating that? That's always been a very hot topic with former colleagues of mine. Zero in on that like day 1, second 2.
Yeah, we are working with our health insurance advisor. Speaking specifically to Tufts, we've collected the town's history over the last year. The numbers look fair, so we're really pushing Tufts to give us a good proposal. Simultaneously, we have identified a new partnership, and I'm going to be meeting with them this coming Monday. I think Maria is going to be joining me. We want to see opportunities to get more benefits and pay less compared to Tufts. I've also asked the agent to contact Blue Cross Blue Shield to see if they'll be willing to put in a proposal. So we're working with our current provider to make sure that we get a good deal, but we're also looking at other opportunities that are available to the town.
So how do we zero in on, the overall budget when this one item is $600,000 that could be in play? I mean, that can sway a lot of other things that we can and can't do if we can pick up on this in some fashion. So I'm just thinking about the timing of this.
Yep.
And sort of when we could insert this into the process, or some savings into the process, savings being projected to what we're actually going to have to carry, and not necessarily savings year over year. But I don't want to take the 50 grand off the table for the nurse if we're going to pick up $750,000 here, right?
Right.
But I don't know when we're gonna pick up that money, if any, on the health services side or insurance side. And would that be after we take something from another department that we may not necessarily have to take? Because, I mean, it's a 1% impact to the taxpayer, this one line item alone. So if we can manage that and manage a couple of these other major things, then we can look into some of this other stuff. But how do we time that out and submit to our colleagues at appropriations at the right time?
I think we follow past practice. Without preempting what the board could do, is to forward the budget to the appropriations committee, give clear instructions to the town manager to continue working on specific items, and as the appropriations committee process evolves, continue to report back to the Board of Selectmen with any changes that might be made.
Okay.
This was a driver last year, too. I remember getting very kind of on and offline about the, just that the unilaterally, it just ironically went up 10% or whatever, I forget what the number was last year, but, the proposals versus, the estimates versus proposals, we need to get I don't know if we need to start acting sooner on this or what, but, $700,000, that's a huge chunk of change. And it's a hard thing to look at a budget on speculation, like we think it's gonna go up $700,000. What if it goes up 900? What if it goes up 100? So it would, for me, it's hard for me, I'm not in finance by any stretch of the imagination. I'm horrible at it on a personal level, and I'm working on it municipally.
Hey, I got a car, you wanna buy it?
Yeah, package it with your house. But it's hard for me to wrap my head around what we're presenting to the town for a budget when we don't know there's a $700,000 huge, giant question mark there. It's hard for me to wrap my head around on how I can present to the people that come up and talk to me outside of here what our budget's gonna be and how much our taxes are gonna go up and blah, 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 if we don't know exact numbers. And when you're looking at a number of $7.8 million for health insurance premiums, I would think that the company that you're going to, if you said, you know what, we got town meeting coming up, I gotta have an accurate number of where it is. I need you to sharpen your pencil, give me an accurate number of where we are, and I need a hard number, concrete, tell me what we're at, so I can present it because I can tell you the Blue Cross isn't gonna bend over backwards and give you a good deal. But Harvard Pilgrim might, or one of these other health insurance companies might. If you go to them and say, I have, this says 7.8 million. If you went to them and said, I have $7 million to spend on health insurance, can you go ahead and meet the expectations that we had last year with vendor X? I think probably March 1st is probably a little late to do that, but I would just like, going into the budget process, this is one that last year I had a hard time wrapping my head around, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but it's $716,000 increase, possibly, and that could go one way or the other. Chances are it's going to go the other, it's going to go down, because I know how you work your magic and that you're as cheap as I am, and I appreciate that. But it would be nice to be able to just have some real solid numbers that we can quantify when we talk to some of these people, whether it be outside here or at town meeting.
Yeah, in fact, to be clear, I think in the last 3-4 years, the final health insurance number has actually allowed the town to fund the substantial increases that we see in the departmental budgets. In other words, by the end of the day, our negotiations with health insurance companies has paid off for the town. We were able to balance the budget last year because for the most part we pushed and got substantial relief. We're going to continue to do that. In terms of timing, I can share with you that the biggest driver behind health insurance is the history of utilization.
Is the what?
The history of utilization, how we're using the insurance. And we always look for the time where the numbers look good to the town. That's why at times we don't pull the trigger until we get the right numbers. And so it's difficult to say, come March, we will have this number. If the numbers don't look great in March, I don't want the taxpayers to be burdened by those numbers. So we're always looking for the right numbers to work well for the town. However, I think in this case, as I said, the numbers look fair. There is an industry administrative increase that you see in all health insurances. However, there is a partnership that we're now talking to, where we think we will get increased benefits and pay less.
Mr. Hearn?
So just one other sort of overall budget comment. Doesn't have to be 100% right now, but what is in stabilization today?
I can give you the
Over 4 million? Roughly, just
Roughly.
is it 10 million, 20
Yeah,
million?
we have the number. I'll give you the number.
5 million?
We have the
5
number.
million?
I'll
Okay.
give you the number.
So in my view,
yeah, I have the number.
doesn't matter.
1 second.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In my view, excess levy and stabilization, I think, are the same. Because excess levy is money left in the taxpayers' pockets, and we're good for it, all of us. If we need it, we can go get it. And I think our friends at Standard & Poor's, while they might look at it a little bit differently, they have, Mr. Kamalo, you will smile, they have acknowledged in the past that excess levy was a reserve in their minds, and they felt it added to our reserves overall. So why would we go take 400 or 500 grand in stabilization, or throw it in this additional stabilization, if we've got excess levy? Standard & Poor's is okay, our bond rating is great, and we're trying to find ways to not increase the taxpayers', burden right now by 4%. I just throw that out there because I'm going to come back to it, right? So we need to be ready for that. I don't think we need to take it. We can debate that offline, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we are starting to get into the time when appropriations is going to need this. So does the agenda on March 5th, you're holding your finger up like there's something important, no? I'm wondering if that gives us a good chunk of time to talk about this. Now we've gone through all the departmental budgets and we're freezing and it's 9:15. Do we have a good chunk of time on March 5th? I know it's a tight agenda, but we do need to start to talk about this more.
Yeah. Yeah, we have several things that have been proposed for the March 5th agenda. We will try and work through the agenda, allocating sufficient time for the budget discussion. And also, because we've been working on the budget for a while now, we will make the budget information available sooner rather than later. And then we can start the discussions, or if the board has any questions, can forward the questions to town staff and we'll respond to them. Yeah. And to Mr. Hess' earlier question through the chair, we're projecting that at the end of FY 2019, the General Stabilization Fund will be at 3.4 million.
3.4 million?
Yes.
Not 5, okay. Well, I like 5 better. Okay.
All right.
So with the excess levy, it puts it around 4.
With the soft reserve, yes.
Sorry?
With the soft reserve, yes.
The soft reserve, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Still.
Just so I am understanding these terms correctly, stabilization fund is money that we actually have.
Correct.
Excess levy is
Cash in.
tax capacity.
Correct.
It's not money, it's the ability to go to the taxpayer and take it out of their pocket. It's not real money. So if you're the taxpayer, excess levy, granted, we didn't tax you last year, the year before, but the taxpayer, that's water over the dam in their mind. Excess levy for the taxpayer is kind of like the sword of Damocles hanging over their head, that at any time, if we needed to, we could bring it down, which is part of the reason we did underwrites in some years, to tell the taxpayers, we're not going to do that to you, even though we have this much that we could go get. So it's not money the way the stabilization is. It's the ability to go get it.
Right, but we don't need it.
No, I know, but
It's a reserve, though.
it's reserved.
In the world of bonding and everything
taxing-
else.
Right. I mean,
It's a reserve.
your lending agencies and
Right.
bond rating agencies see that. But from the standpoint of the town, the budget, and the taxpayer, it's not, unlike the stabilization, which is literally a rainy day fund that you could dip into if you needed it. Excess levy is ability to add more taxation onto the citizen if we needed it. So it's not as good as a stabilization fund, but anyway, just so we're
In my view, it's better than a stabilization fund. Because
Because?
it's stable money that we need, if we need it, we can get it, but the taxpayers get to use it.
But the
Until-
taxpayers have to pay it, unlike the stabilization, which is money that we already have.
Well, the taxpayers pay the stabilization too. That's taxpayer money
Yeah.
sitting in an account doing nothing. So, yeah, you need a stabilization account, I get that. But you should take money out of taxpayers' pockets to throw in there and raise their taxes, exorbitantly in a single tax year just to fill up the stabilization more. When the reserve is sitting with the taxpayers, it's still a reserve. And that's how it's viewed in the bond markets. For the most part, it's called a soft reserve.
Those.
So I guess the bottom line is, I am opposed to taking the excess levy to put money into stabilization in a year when we're gonna be asking taxpayers to pay 4% more on average. I'm opposed to it. So we gotta figure that out, or at least I may be the only person voting that way, but that's how I'll vote. And you know that, I mean, we've been doing this forever, so.
Exactly. I've worked with Brian for 10 years now. I think we do have an answer to your concern, namely using excess levy to fund the stabilization fund. I think in past years, we've always looked at other sources for supporting or augmenting the town's stabilization funds.
Free cash?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is money
Yeah,
we
but-
already have.
Okay, let's take this offline.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right, given the hour, okay, then let's close the budget hearing out for now. We'll return to this on March 5th. And our almost last item is the annual town meeting. Board of Selectmen will finalize its own town meeting articles. And so we have 3 articles, and then, Elaine, there was a list of other articles. When it says potential ATM, are these just articles that I don't understand what the potential ones are. Are those articles that we just didn't put up or are coming from somewhere else? There's
No.
3 that we put out, the
Yes.
PEG, the Fruit Street, and the Kennel Bylaw. Those are the 3.
Yes, the board has a long list of articles, and we're starting to bring them in chunks before the board. So the first chunk
Oh,
has those
okay.
3.
Okay,
Yes.
that's why I was confused. So those 3 aren't all, it's just those are the ones we're going to discuss tonight.
Yes,
And then we can go home because it's cold. We don't have to do the other ones tonight.
exactly.
Okay, good, because we're freezing. Okay, all right. The first one is the PEG Enterprise Fund. So, PEG Enterprise Fund, this article would accept the provision of Chapter 44, Section 53, and the 3/4 of Mass General Law, and establish a separate revenue account to be known as the PEG Access and Cable Related Fund, into which would be deposited funds received in connection with franchise agreements between a cable operator and the town. Funds would be used for cable-related purposes consistent with the franchise agreement. Okay. can I just ask, have these revenues come in before and they've been handled in a different way, and this is just a new way to receive them?
Yes, they have been coming through the town and immediately transferred to HCAM.
Okay.
The new law now requires the town to hold them, appropriate them at town meeting for specific uses by the local cable channel.
Okay.
So this is a change in the law from previous years?
Yes.
And, okay.
So.
It seems like a housekeeping measure to stay in compliance with mass law?
Yeah, it's the DOR guideline. The DOR rules, Department of Revenue rules.
Yep.
Yes.
So you said they used to go to HCAM and now the town will hold them and then.
Appropriate them at town meeting.
At town meeting?
Yes.
So it's like, will we appropriate the whole lump for HCAM's use, or they cannot spend any of it unless they come to town meeting? Does the whole thing get appropriated at town meeting?
Yes, the whole amount gets
Okay.
appropriated.
So HCAM is still going to get it in kind of a lump sum?
Yes.
It's just, there's a town meeting step involved now instead of a direct line into HCAM?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Other questions comments on board members? Seems okay? Everybody's happy?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, the second one is Fruit Street Parcel 8, property lease at the 2017 annual town meeting. It was voted to lease a portion of Parcel 8 of the town-owned Fruit Street property to a nonprofit youth organization based in Hopkinton for a period of up to 50 years. The Hopkinton Scout Leaders Association has submitted a draft article which would authorize the lease to an organization that serves Hopkinton youth for a period of up to 99 years. So I thought, I guess I'm remembering wrong, I thought when this came up, that discussion happened right on town meeting floor, and the Scouts were uncomfortable with it, and they did an amendment that it increased the period.
Yes, when we went to town meeting, I think the offer was for 25 years.
Oh, was it that
And
short?
then it was raised to 50.
Oh, okay.
And subsequent to that, the Scouts have come back and said, will the town consider 99?
All right, I remembered the change. I didn't realize it had started out as short as 25. Okay. Questions? Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and finally, third is the kennel bylaw amendments. The current kennel bylaw was adopted in 2017. Proposed amendments would, 1, delineate the scope of kennel inspections performed prior to issuing a license and during any suspension or revocation proceeding. 2, provide a standard for passing any such inspection, which shall include standards and limitations for applications of kennels that have previously had their license revoked and/or suspended. And 3, to ensure that the bylaw is consistent throughout when referencing kennel inspections. I know I had occasion to read through the language. It seemed to make sense to me and provide consistency. Do other board members have questions or comments?
In fact, if I may,
Sorry.
Mr. Carr?
yes, if I may, through the chair, since we sent this draft to the board, we have received some suggestions on how to perhaps strengthen a few sentences. The first one is under 62-7B, general requirements. Item D, the number of permitted dogs. We specifically reference the animal control officer, placing a cap on the number of dogs permitted in any kennel. We have inserted, we're suggesting that the board accepts inserting the phrase or agent. In other words, it's the animal control officer or agent. Okay? And then going down to 62-7E inspections, we have received feedback that the second item, inquiry with the Hopkinton Fire Department inspectional services, Board of Health, Police Department, to ensure that any applicable requirements of those departments have been met. We're saying perhaps this might be burdensome to personal kennels, and therefore we're saying this should take into consideration specific circumstances, for example, for personal kennels, where this very long list of requirements may not be necessary.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll provide the language that specifies that. And then finally, it's been suggested that we should include a provision allowing the animal control officer to delegate any of the responsibilities in this bylaw. Remember when we had the inspection and we had to rely on the police department? This provision will allow for that to happen.
Or their agent.
Yes.
Any questions?
Just on the kennel bylaw, so obviously we've had some situations in town and other entities still in town. This clearly is going to be reviewed by Ray, and it's not going to set us up for any kind of issues going forward with past or current organizations, correct?
That's correct. And in fact, it may be helpful explaining the process that we normally follow. We don't like surprises. So the items that show up in any bylaw changes are items that we've been discussing and tracking throughout the year with town council. So Ray is already aware of all these changes and has reviewed this draft.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And to that point, I believe some of these, I mean, it's a learning process, and I think some of these changes came out of lessons learned previously, that we found some deficiencies in the way it was written, and Ray agreed there were things that we could tighten up to make it work better for us. So there were some holes and things, so. Okay, are we, Mr. Nesrela,
Yeah,
please?
just one quick thing on the kennel bylaw. We had a very contentious meeting regarding the kennel bylaw, or kennel, and we were following a different procedure than we were following a different procedure than what was laid out in our bylaw. Are the changes here going to address those, that following that alternate procedure, or are we going to have like a standard procedure where we would follow it under revocation, under expiration, under new,
We have identified steps that protect the community that we're adding to the procedure. For example, the new language clarifies the process and the protocol that a suspended institution should follow. We didn't have that before. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Are we taking a vote on these?
No.
Giving input?
Giving input, socializing the articles, and we will settle back with the board at the appropriate time and ask the board to take specific positions.
All right. So is everybody content right now with the 3 articles as presented? Okay, good. Then let's just move on to the town manager's report. And Mr. Kamalo, I think you want to talk to us about synthetic turf fields and anything else.
Yes, there was an expectation that the Board of Selectmen will be sanctioning the formation of the Oversight Committee. I did review together with Town Council all the discussions leading to the town meeting vote. That matter is in the hands strictly of the School Committee and Park and Rec Commission, and the Board of Selectmen has no role.
I'm sorry, one more time? So you reviewed it with town council, and he said it's not our thing, it's the school committee and the
Park and Rec.
which is what I believe was how it was set up. That's good.
That's it?
I'm all set.
You're all set? Okay. Liaison reports, do we have any from anyone here? Mr. Nasrullah, anything to report?
Well, I went to the planning board meeting last night, and they were going through the zoning bylaw amendments. I did not bring my notes though, so I'm gonna put a placeholder there for our next meeting, and I'll fill it all in there.
Anyone else? Mr. Tedstone?
Nope, none for me.
Mr. Hur?
None, thank you.
Okay, and I will just add, because I went to the planning board meeting as well, and I can summarize a couple of changes. They pulled back on some of them. There was one article mentioning educational uses that they realized it really wasn't necessary. Those uses are already available, and the feeling was we don't need to make town meeting any longer by articles that accomplish something that's doesn't need to be accomplished. And there are several items that they were recommending to be by right, and the board pretty much unanimously felt that it should be under special permit to continue to have a bit more control on those things. So they've removed a couple articles, and they've pulled back on some of the language to keep a greater measure of control on some of these permits. So that's the summary I would give. Okay. So, any future board agenda items?
Yes, I have one.
Mr. Nasrallah, please.
We should discuss getting weather stripping on these windows.
I was going to say that. Yes. Why it's so cold. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor,
Aye.
please say aye. Aye.
I believe we're
Thank
signing.
you. And we are signing some stuff. So, let's see, let me...
These are historic windows.
The meeting is closed.